27.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own
assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because, as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, Great Britain. It's Jonathan Gullis sitting in for the amazing Alex Phillips here on Weekend Breakfast on the home of common sense. That is Talk, and what a show we've got lined up for you this morning. Plenty of stories to cover, plenty of reactions that we want to get from you. And I'm going to remind you straight away, for those of you who've got your alarm set early on a Sunday morning, how you can get in touch. You can call us or WhatsApp us and voice note us via WhatsApp on 0344 499 1000. You can also text in with the word talk at the start of your message to 87222. And you can follow and message us on X at talkTV. We have a lot going on today, a lot of front pages and stories inside the papers on this Sunday to cover for you. And I'm delighted to be joined by a friend of ours here on Talk. He is broadcaster Duncan Barks in the studio with me live this morning. Good morning, Duncan.
Morning.
We're both looking sort of had our cornflakes this morning, and we're all
ready to go. Caffeined up.
That's what I like to hear. That's what I like to hear. Well, what an array of stories we've got for you today. If you turn, ladies and gentlemen, the front page of the Sun, and it's also the front page of the Mail, Angela Rayner buys a luxury seafront pad for her to enjoy. If we look at the front page of the Sunday Telegraph, it warns of a 1970s style IMF bailout and a winter fuel cut that's still going to be in place and will apparently hit 600,000 disabled pensioners. And we've got here the Times, where Kemi Badenoch has done a big exclusive interview giving some background on her, as well as how Sir Keir Starmer has announced today some new powers to curb illegal migration by making sure that the appeals process is no longer jammed up and that people who aren't meant to be here are able to be processed and then deported if necessary. And that is where we're going to start first of all, ladies and gentlemen. Sir Keir Starmer, in the Times today, has said that he plans to phase out main tribunal courts used by failed refugee or asylum seeker applicants. He wants to instead appoint a commission of professional adjudicators, we all look forward to seeing who that's going to be part of, who will assess the appeals. This new body is going to get statutory legal powers to prioritise cases of illegal migrants housed in taxpayer-funded accommodation and foreign national offenders who have already got deportation orders but are using the legal system to prevent that from happening. It is apparently going to help speed up the appeals and help close hotels quicker. And it's going to be over big concerns that Article 8 of the European Convention for Human Rights, ECHR, Right to a Family Life, has been overused. But at the same time, the Refugee Council will urge the government to actually grant asylum to those that they likely will approve for a time-limited period. Is this just going to be an amnesty through the back door? Well, you forgive people for thinking it will be, because Labour in their first year in office has had 111,000 asylum applications. That is up 14% on the year before. And they've also got 8% more illegal migrants in hotels, 32,000 in total. And there's currently a backlog, is estimated, of 51,000 appeals in the first tribunal court. And the concern that many of you and I will have is that 48% of all those who appeal end up being approved and given the right to remain in the United Kingdom. Those figures coming from 2024. So, Duncan,
yes.
So Keir Starmer reacting, I suspect, and responding, although they claim they've been doing this for months in the light pipeline, to Nigel Farage's big exclusive in the Times yesterday. Is this something we should be celebrating, or let's be cautious?
It's another day, isn't it? It's another day, it's another headline, and it's the Labour government chasing their tail regarding this issue. And we know it's the thing that most people in this country care about, immigration, both legal and illegal immigration to this country. We know that from the polling. And I mean, last weekend there was another story of Yvette Cooper saying, we're going to do this, we're going to be tough, etc. And this is the problem they have. They know it's a massive issue. What they're trying to do is reform the system that exists, right, which is full of lefty lawyers, judges, etc., etc. You and I both know, Jonathan, the only way to crack this, to stop people coming to this country illegally and claiming asylum for whatever reason, and I, for the record, I've said this before on Talk, I reckon about 3 to 4% of those claims are genuine asylum claims. The rest are the economic migrants. They want to come here for a better life. Let's not muck around, all right? The only way it's going to work to stop illegal entry into this country is to have a deterrent. And you will know, because you were part of the last government, we had the Rwanda policy, and on day one of the Labour government, Keir Starmer scrapped it. And until you have a deterrent, it's not going to work. People are going to still come to this country, regardless of this idea of reforming the system. It won't make any difference.
Well, the irony yesterday was that we saw a story in The Sun that says the Labour MP for Mansfield says we need to have a Rwanda-style third country in which to deport people. I mean, who could have guessed that that would have been something that would have come back to bite them in the backside?
No, and you don't have to be the sharpest tool in the box. It's really obvious. If you say to people, look, if you come to this country illegally, this is what's going to happen to you, people go, I'm not going to come, right? This idea that it's like, well, let's change the system so we can process the claims faster simply doesn't wash. It doesn't deter people from coming here. And you're absolutely right to make the point that all of this is in reaction to Nigel Farage's Reform UK policy that was announced a few days ago, with one of the headline measures being 5 deportation flights a day. So if you are someone who's going to chance your arm to come to this country on a small boat across the channel, if you start hearing that there might be a government who's going to have 5 flights a day flying you somewhere, like the Ascension Islands in the South Atlantic or whatever, you might be thinking, I'm not going to come. There's no nice way of doing this, right? There needs to be a hard and fast deterrent.
And we've seen that, for example, in Greece, where they've got large-scale detention centres being built to detain people. Ugly-looking things, but designed deliberately to say that you're going to be in this steel cage, essentially. America, we've seen President Trump with his alligator Alcatraz in Florida, but again, making the point that they're not going to be apologetic for wanting to control their borders. And I agree with you. The problem is speeding up the processing is fine. The problem is people know around 50% of those being processed, or actually with 60% on their first application are being approved, and 50% of those who appeal are being approved. So it's essentially just an amnesty in all but name. And therefore, like you say, if the smugglers know and they can go to their future clients, by the way, I sent 80 people over, of which 2/3 guaranteed on the first attempt.
The odds are still good, aren't they?
And then out the 40% that appeal, 20% of those, half of those are going to definitely be locked in. Like you say, your odds are basically 80% chance of being allowed to stay in the United Kingdom. And then when you have the France deal, the farcical France deal, which is 1 out, 17 in, 94% chance of being able to stay in the UK if you come through with the 50 a week at best, as you say, Nigel Farage talking about 5 flights a day. I mean, it just shows that the government is trying to talk tough, but they're also struggling with their ideological viewpoint on this issue, whilst also seeing what other world leaders are doing and getting success.
Yeah, so it's in Labour's DNA, isn't it, to be sympathetic to people who want to come to this country. And this is the problem with it. You mentioned the deal, the very weak deal that was outlined with Macron, the 1 in, 1 out. And that's another example.
Let's not forget, we saw that boat slashing, ironically, with a camera crew the day before President Macron's say visit. I don't think we've seen any video footage since.
I think the police have lost their knives police.
Right, okay.
On
That's
the
good to
beaches
know.
in France.
Good to know.
So there's no slashing and puncturing of dinghies. But that particular announcement was made because Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, knows this is a massive issue, so he has to be seen to be doing something. Exactly with his front page of the Sunday Times this morning, the idea that he's going to curb judges' power in asylum cases. Again, it will make very little difference because the thing that most people want in this country who are concerned about this issue is a hard and fast deterrent to stop people coming here.
I mean, this comes back again, doesn't it, to the problem with Sir Keir Starmer, in the sense of, whilst it's sometimes maybe, as Morgan McSweeney is famously alluded to have said, again, he would probably deny it, but I think others have written it up in the press, that he quite liked Sir Keir Starmer because Sir Keir Starmer was movable, flexible, didn't have any fixed ideology, was a good host for Mr McSweeney, very much in the style of Dominic Cummings when it came to controlling the leader. And Sir Keir Starmer, unfortunately, just for him, decided to prove that point when he said he gave his big reset. I don't remember which reset we were on at that stage, but big reset speech to say, I am tough on immigration. I am the man who will take on Nigel Farage and reform UK. And then a few weeks later admits, I didn't really read the speech properly. And the bit when I said we're an island of strangers, I really deeply regret that I shouldn't have used it. And then when realising that that was the one thing that everyone agreed with him in the country basically on, he then went, oh no, the sentiment was the right. It's just those exact words. I mean, it just looks ridiculous.
Jonathan, I think you and I both know that was a load of old guff. He knew exactly what was in that speech, right? You do not go to a podium, get on the stage and read a speech that you've not least skimmed.
Otherwise, why are you Prime Minister if you can't even be bothered to read a speech?
So he knew what was in that speech. He took a punt because he wanted to be perceived as being tough on the issue. Then there was a massive backlash from a lot of his backbenchers and he rode back on it. And that's another example of a weak Prime Minister.
It's just getting embarrassing. And when we see now David Lammy, a story that I think is in the Telegraph, where David Lammy is sending immigration experts to Western Africa, countries like Ghana and Nigeria, to catch migrants with and smuggling gangs with fake visas. Officials are being sent from Great Britain to deal with the fact that we have a large rise in sub-Saharan Africa migration at this moment in time. Apparently we're working with local police to crack down on the gangs that are supplying false travel documentation. I mean, nice little story to try and beef up the other story.
Does it? It doesn't cut through. It comes back to this point. You need a deterrent. It worked in Australia with Tony Abbott, who had the boats towed back, didn't he? Do you remember? You need that kind of deterrent. And literally, if you have something hard and fast put in place, you will see those figures in terms of illegal crossings plummet.
Actually, out of interest, because obviously I didn't get to speak to you yesterday, Duncan, what do you think of what Nigel Farage said? I mean, very bold stuff, leaving the ECHR well-known position, but scrapping the Human Rights Act, derogating from the Refugee Convention from the UN and the UN Convention against Human Torture as well. Introducing a British Bill of Rights, which, by the way, I'm sceptical of, having spoken with Robert Buckland, who I appreciate is on the different wing of the Conservative Party, but he did say a British Bill of Rights will just reintroduce the same issue you've got with the ECHR, enabling judges to interpret the political wording of such a document. So I think that's something Reform need to think very carefully on. I think it used to be the Conservative kind of go-to. I think Reform, I understand why they've gone to it, but there's pitfalls with it, I think, as well. However, still British Bill of Rights, instead of having ECHR, so at least you could say, well, at least we're dealing with UK judges, not foreign judges. Then obviously saying, as you say, 5 deportation flights a day, immediate arrest and detention on old military bases, up to 24,000 spaces on old military bases being taken up. I mean, it is a very bold, eye-catching policy, but does it also run the risk of massively raising expectations and therefore looking to voters like it's almost too good to be true and undermining reform?
So I think there are a couple of things here. First off, it needed to be hard-hitting to get the headlines, and it did. It got the front pages of a number of newspapers, chiefly the Times, who were running with it during the week.
Not exactly a reform-supporting paper, naturally.
Well, they're softening up. I was on the train and I was reading the editorial, the comment pieces that the Times journalists or the editor writes, and they were slowly warming to reform's idea. Things are starting to change. It's really interesting. It's quite hard-hitting. It is controversial. If Reform were to get into government, they wouldn't do all of these things, right? You and I know how politics works. This is about getting the sentiment and the message across, and I think they've managed to achieve it. I'm really interested. I mean, I do think, I don't, part of me, as someone who is not politically liberal, but wants to live in a relatively decent country, I don't want to look on the hillside and see some kind of detention centre with barbed wire around it, right? I don't want to see that on my hills in England. But I accept there is a very solid argument to say that we need some kind of facility to show to people if they come to this country illegally, you're not going to go into a hotel or some home, some house that the Home Office has decided to purchase or whatever. You're going to go to this ex-military base here. And if that military base doesn't have enough buildings... Look, remember during the pandemic, those Nightingale hospitals were literally constructed, what, within a couple of weeks?
2 weeks at most, I think.
So, yeah, you can actually... We can do it if we want to. And they can
Nigel Farage made that point, didn't he? He said it's all about political will.
Yeah, it's prefab buildings, and it's like, if you come to this country illegally, you're going to go here, right? Not in a hotel on the side of a town centre or whatever. And again, the optics of that are quite powerful, because if those gangs who are doing the smuggling or doing the illegal crossings start to see those images of these kind of like Nightingale-style constructions on an ex-military base somewhere, then it's kind of like they're going to have a harder sell, aren't they, to their clients, if you like, which is just like they will see that image as well and just think, oh, I might end up there. I don't want to go there. So I think it's hard-hitting, and it's designed to be hard-hitting, but this is exactly the kind of stuff the electorate wants to see at the moment, because the Conservatives are taking their time to get their act together about what is the solution here about this. Labour, as we see this morning, keep coming out with, oh, we're going to make it harder to do this. Well, people are bored of it. They've heard of it so much inside the last 12 months. So Reform are taking the ground that's been created.
I say, number one, Labour's going to suffer whether they like it or not. And I've got friends in the Labour parliamentary party as well as Labour members, OK? I've said to them, to their faces, Sir Keir Starmer is so damaged, you cannot recover from that level of personal damage. And as long as he's leading you, there's no chance of a majority. They may come back as the largest party, but it will be therefore needing a Lib-Lab coalition. But I keep saying, I know. Don't worry. I've had the cold sweats too.
Palpitations,
But then I think that's just how badly damaged it is with the Conservative Party. Chris Phillips coming out to slam Nigel Farage's plan, when actually, for me, this is a moment where the Conservative Reform, you should be uniting and saying, you know what? Let's actually come up with a plan. Let's look at what we're proposing in the Conservative deportation bill, which makes me really angry, as I ranted yesterday, because there was many things in that, provisions in that bill that people like myself put forward when I was an MP, which lots of current Conservative MPs voted against when it came to amendments to Rishi Sunak's Safety of Rwanda Act. So it's a bit hard for me to swallow that they suddenly buy into all this. But imagine if the right, for example, on this issue, united. Number one, let's be honest, there could well be a Reform and Conservative coalition in the future. And secondly, on an issue like this, I think there is a cigarette paper between the Conservative and Reform in terms of how far they need to go. Kemi, as you say, is just taking longer to get there, to maybe bring some people along in her party, whereas Nigel's, been consistent for a long time.
I mean, I think it's really interesting to hear you outline your thinking there. I think the biggest issue is, and I don't want to put you in a difficult position with the Conservative Party, but the Conservative Party, some of its MPs probably shouldn't be in the party.
No, they shouldn't.
And what I mean by that is I see two sides of the Conservative Party, some what I would call traditional, old-school Conservative thinkers and believers, and then the other bit, a load of Lib Dems, to be perfectly honest with you. And until that problem is sorted out, I think Kemi Badenoch has got an issue in taking her party forward.
Robert Jenrick, Danny Kruger, Gareth Bacon...
Katie Lamb,
Miriam Cates, who I no longer is inside, but Miriam Cates, Sakib Bharti, Gareth Davis, Nick Timothy, Lewis Cocking, Jack Rankin are probably a number of MPs I could point to and say I have trust in, but I would say then 75% of them, I've been in rooms with you, I know what you really think. You might suddenly say what I was saying to get yourself elected. I don't believe for a second if you were in power, you'd actually deliver on this stuff, because you'd be so worried about upsetting people.
Well, this is a challenge, and what do you do with a perfectly good constituency MP like Caroline Noakes, right? Who is I would say is remarkably on the left of the Conservative Party. But here's the challenge that I think Kemi Badenoch and the Conservatives have: can you actually out Farage? And even if you decide to change leader and you end up with Robert Jenrick, because as some people have been suggesting over the last several months, and his social media work is brilliant, by the way, he's really hitting the ground running with that. But even if you had him leading the Conservative Party, can he out Farage?
No.
And the answer is, as you've just said, no. So if we agree on that, what do you do if you're the Conservative Party? What space is left for you to actually occupy?
And I think this is the issue. The Conservative Party is yet to understand or even decide which group of voter do they want to be a champion for and speak to, and how they're going to do that. Until they answer that question, everything else is just guff.
And then you've got as you and I both know, the core Conservative vote now is over the age of 60, right? And that vote, and I say this with respect to Talk viewers and listeners, is dying off quite literally. So how do you get the new voters coming through? That ain't happening at the moment. Yet you look to Farage and Reform UK, you look at his following on TikTok, you look at the voting intention in some of the age demographics, and he's storming it with younger voters.
Exactly. And then final story around migration, one the Daily Mail that's deeply disturbing. A 29-year-old Afghan migrant, Sadek Nikzad, lived as a tourist in 3 European countries, Italy, France and Germany, so enjoyed a bit of holidaying, and then entered the UK illegally via small boat, raped a 15-year-old girl in Falkirk, Scotland in September 2023, and has just been found guilty of rape and sexual assault in the High Court in Edinburgh and awaiting sentencing. I mean, I've said it, and I've been pillared by, guess what, the lefty liberal elite, for saying, whether we like or not, some of these men, and they're overwhelmingly, as we know, fighting-age men coming over on small boats, have very medieval attitudes towards women and girls. And this issue, like we've seen the protests outside the Bell Hotel Epping, albeit the two men currently, I think, charged yet to have their day in court, and both say that they're not guilty of the offences they've been charged with, just for legal reasons, to say that. Legitimately then, these migrant hotel protests are going up because people are saying our streets are no longer safe. Even Baroness Casey said these child rape gangs in her audit are showing more and more illegal migrants showing up as being part and connected. Isn't it disturbing?
You've hit the nail on the head. It's a cultural issue here, and I said this time and time again. When you have people who come to this country from other countries where there are no rights for women, or very little rights, they can't vote, they can't wear what they want, they can't have makeup, etc., and they're treated appallingly, when the men from those countries come to this country where we have a different set of values, and rightly so, there's going to be a clash. And this is the problem. The problem with Labour is they won't acknowledge it. We can all see this. We can see that it's a problem. It's a society problem. And sadly, we're going to read more and more of these cases like this one in Scotland over the coming months, because the two cultures cannot mix. What I find really interesting about the story that we've just mentioned here is it kind of proves something which I get really annoyed with whenever I engage with people who perhaps have a more tolerant attitude towards giving people asylum, when they go, well, they're fleeing persecution. Well, this bloke clearly wasn't, because he spent his time in Italy, Germany and France taking in the sights and enjoying some mussels and fries by the looks of it. That's not someone who's desperate to flee persecution in my book.
And it also shows that mainland Europe, there is no war or conflict, otherwise you wouldn't be able to just roam around and enjoy yourself if there was. So the persecution. Now, we've actually got, I'm delighted to have this, Matt in Hove has sent us a voice note already. Well done, Matt, for being up at this time in the morning on his views regarding migration and speeding up of processing for those particularly under appeal.
Jonathan, Matt in Hove here. Now, how on earth is speeding up the asylum process going to stop these migrants coming over on boats? It's going to speed it up. It just means they'll spend less time in a hotel or an HMO while the process is being claimed. And as soon as they get granted asylum, they're going to be able to claim benefits and go and get their own flat paid for by the government. It's absolutely ludicrous.
All I can say is, Matt, I think you have beautifully summed up in far fewer words than I'm able to, so well done to you, much better orator than I am, the general mood and feeling, and I think you've backed up exactly what Duncan was saying earlier, which is this is what people are going to think about this story. It might make some Labour MPs have something to tweet or post on their social media and feel comfortable about, but no one believes it's actually going to put off anyone getting in a boat and coming across from France, does it, Duncan?
No, not at all. I mean, Matt's in Hove, isn't he, which is where Angela Rayner's bought her third property, I think, or something, so maybe you should have a word with her when she's walking down the seafront and just go, Ange, this doesn't work. It might be great for you to tweet with your fellow Labour MPs, but actually, just saying you're going to speed up the process is not enough of a deterrent to stop people coming here.
Well, we'll be coming back to more of those stories later on. And remember, you can call 0344 499 1000. You can also message us on that number. And, as Matt's done, send us a voice note too and have your voice heard throughout the nation's airwaves. You can text in the word talk at the starting message to 87222. And you can follow us and message us on X at talkTV. After the break, Rachel Reeves Are we heading for a 1970s-style IMF bailout? What stealth taxes is she coming for next? And guess what? The Office of Value for Money didn't end up being value for money. We'll see you shortly.
What we see with the protests there, I see really a class divide. I'm really proud to be working class. I come from a council house in Bolton. I live in Stoke-on-Trent. And what I see with these protests in Epping, and you've got all across the country as far as Perth in Scotland, Cardiff in Wales, but across England as well, it is the working class people who live, a few miles away from those hotels, who are simply sick and tired of this. They're sick and tired of people being shipped in who they know nothing about.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, and I'm Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the amazing Alex Phillips here on Weekend Breakfast, joining you on this great Sunday morning to bring you the latest news. And I'm delighted that a friend of us here on Talk, broadcaster Duncan Barks, is in the studio with me, going through the big stories of the day and looking at what's happening on our front pages. We turn from migration to the economy, and on the front page of the Telegraph, it is clear as day. Rachel Reeves is heading for an IMF-style bailout not seen since the 1970s. It says here that Reeves's tax and spend gamble is steering the UK to a 1970s-style debt crisis, risking an IMF bailout last seen in 1976. We know from the National Institute of Economic and Social Research that there's about a £41 billion black hole, but actually goes up to £50 billion when you add in the £9.9 billion worth of headroom that she needs to at least leave herself as she did before. It's referred to as the Healey-style crisis, expected potentially as early 2026. However, the government would say, well, government borrowing has actually gone down. We saw that the latest figures show that they borrowed £1.1 billion less than forecast. Oh, what a relief that it will be to us all. The fact that debt's at 96.1% of GDP shouldn't stress us out one bit. The fact the IMF's own annual review of this country suggests there's a £20 billion black hole to fill, and they've suggested making sure that if you earn money in this country, if you're a high income earner, guess what? We start charging you to use the NHS. Not that you've not paid enough through your taxes already, of course. Abolish the pension triple lock. I suspect that will be politically unstomachable. But the reality is that the Office of National Statistics said between April and July 2025, we've seen a total of £60 billion worth of government borrowing. Unemployment up to 4.7%. Inflation up to 3.8%. The cost of government borrowing higher than when Liz Truss had her disastrous mini budget. I mean, Duncan, all the lights are flashing on the dashboard, aren't they?
They are, but she's only got herself to blame, Rachel Reeves. She has mismanaged the economy for the last, 13 months. And I think you can take some of this back to her initial budget, where she kept banging on about growth. and this has been the mantra, growth is the answer. We all know that growth in the private sector boosts the economy, right? And then she outlines a load of measures, chiefly raising national insurance paid by employers. The minimum wage goes up as well. I know people who run businesses who are looking now just going, I might as well just give this up. Can't make any money out of this. Or they're in it for the long haul, but they're having to stop employing or recruit new people. They can't do pay rises for their staff. I mean, it's an absolute nightmare. She's the architect of where we find ourselves. Do I have a degree of sympathy? I don't, because I think she's made some decisions which have left us in the position we're in. I think she's also politically boxed herself in with this idea of saying we will not raise taxes on working people, which is what she said in the past. But working people are already impacted by some of her decisions because of the cost of living. Going back to the point I made earlier, if you run a business and you've had to pay more in employers' national insurance contributions as a result of the measure she announced, and more of the minimum wage, you're having to pass that cost on to your customer. That fuels the cost of living. So whilst there might not be an increased tax on working people are having to pay more if they go out for a pint or they go for a burger somewhere, or, you know, they buy a widget from a factory.
And what I find most insulting when Labour say, oh, but we protected working people.
Rubbish.
Well, the overwhelming majority of businesses in this country are SMEs, many of whom employ 10 or fewer people. Are we saying that the owner of a local printing shop, the owner of a local butcher's and bakery, the owner of a local grocery store, a shop, they're not working people? They're the ones who work 20-hour plus days. I've seen it with my own father running his own business, sat at the kitchen table late at night doing the finances, doing the HR, whilst then going out the next day and teaching students to learn how to play piano and other things. I mean, it's just so insulting. And as you say, it's those businesses that are being impacted. Yes, your Amazons can suck it up. Of course they can. But the Amazons are not the businesses that are being hit the hardest by this. And if those businesses are letting people go, and like you, I know many SMEs are choosing to let one or two staff, definitely already gone, off their books because of the increased costs through the increase in the minimum wage and through the increase of employers' national insurance. And as you say, that also gets passed on by not having the same level of pay rises. So that means that wages stagnate in the private sector, as well as therefore meaning that the cost of goods, as you rightly point out, also go up, hitting us as well. And then Labour's a net zero agenda, which I love how Sir Keir Starmer, when he sat next to Donald Trump in Scotland, when Donald Trump was attacking the windmills and he's trying to say to Starmer, oh, it's not your fault. So Keir Starmer's backbone once again went missing, because the man who's happy when Donald Trump's not around to say he's Mr. Green Energy, go, 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 suddenly found it would stay quiet. And I wonder why. Wasn't he? Very silent.
But just rolled into what you said there, Jonathan, the impact on small businesses, the impact is even greater as a result of, well, it will be, I believe, as a result of Angela Rayner's Employment Rights Bill, which is going through Parliament at the moment.
Yet to even know what the impact of that will be.
And it's gone back and forth between the Lords and the Commons, but there is a real fear from business groups like the CBI that this will mean increased costs for small businesses. And you're right, Amazon and people can make it work, they can absorb it, but the small businesses will end up having to fork out in order to keep within the law. You've got that issue, makes it harder to be blunt, to fire people who aren't particularly productive. That really matters if you're a small business. So this is and there's more bureaucracy. This is yet another thing that's going to make running a small business in this country really, really hard. So when you have small business, and you're right, small business that predominantly drives the economy, they contribute to growth. When they're under the cosh like this, they're going to give up or they can't perform, which is why we have stagnation in the economy. And it does feel like the 1970s in this country at the moment. You know, you don't have to look too far to look at tube drivers striking again because they're not getting enough money. I believe that
junior doctors on
junior doctors,
nurses potentially, some are rumouring.
You know, and the 1970s repeats itself in Birmingham still, where the bins aren't being emptied. So it does have a feeling of that decade.
Although in Birmingham they can take down the St George's flag, but can't find time to pick up your rubbish or fill a pothole.
Exactly that.
I mean, it's just getting quite absurd and obviously very scary. And it won't be helped by the fact that also on the front of the Telegraph, ladies and gentlemen, in a small writing underneath the picture, it says winter fuel cut will hit 600,000 disabled pensioners. I only laugh because I just don't think this government has a clue on how to try and win back anyone in this country at the moment in time. About 600,000 disabled pensioners will be stripped of their winter fuel payments despite Labour's about U-turn on eligibility criteria. An equality report quietly published by the government on Friday revealed that more than a quarter of pensioners due to miss out on the heating allowance were disabled. It comes despite Rachel Reeves' pledge that the new system, which no longer restricts eligibility to those on pension credit, is targeted and fair. I mean, this battle is just never going to end for the Labour government, is it?
It's not, and I was genuinely staggered just how bad the politics were, not surprised, but staggered, of the first 3 or 4 months of the Labour government, because they made this announcement, and it was almost like, oh, we got all of these rich pensioners, these baby boomers who are getting this winter fuel allowance, and Elton John gets it, and Paul McCartney gets it as well. We've got to stop this. So they make this announcement, and of course, they didn't think about the politics of it. They didn't think about what the outcome would be, and the outcome was a lot of Labour MPs, and indeed MPs from other political parties, having constituents filling up their inbox just going, hang on a second, for me this is the difference between paying these bills and not paying these bills. And I think I'm right in saying they didn't even do an impact assessment before making this announcement, which, I mean, is so naive, it's unbelievable. So again, you can, if you're going to be charitable, you can say it's a naivety of a new government. If you don't want to be charitable, you can just say these people have no idea what they're doing.
I mean, the fact that they hung their political future on that decision, and like you say, whether they like it or not, that was the first big announcement from this government when it came to fiscal economic policy. And I know they think the U-turn is somehow going to save them. People will forget. They'll convince themselves that. I'm going to let Labour MPs know, I'm sorry to break it to you, I've been there, right? I've been where you are between 2019 and 2024. They don't forget. They do not forget. When the Conservative Party had an opposition day motion to vote against extending free school meals into the summer holidays, which I still think was the right thing to vote against, because the holiday activity food programme was a far superior programme that gave schools the ability to support children who don't qualify for free school meals. It means those just about managings who were just over the threshold could also get amazing food support and physical activity. And I know that the holiday activity food programmes run across Stoke-on-Trent by the Hove Foundation. Selfish plug whilst I'm on there for the amazing work done there by Adam Yates, former Port Vale FC footballer. You know, is an incredible testament to what can be done. However, I can assure you, Labour MPs, my inbox, social media comments, door knocking, people did not forget, because the headline was simply that the Conservative Party voted against extending free school meals. And someone who'd been a teacher, that particularly hurt me, because I knew what I did vote for and what I was voting against. But the message, no matter how many times I repeated it, just simply didn't cut through. The voters will not forgive, and they will not forget. And another one here, Duncan, that we've got about stealth taxes incoming, shock horror from Rachel Reeves again. I think this is in the Daily Mail again. The National Institute for Economic and Social Research, as they say, have said about the £50 billion black hole. If they freeze income tax thresholds, something that Rachel Reeves last autumn said that she was going to unfreeze in order to show that people were no longer going to get taxed. I mean, her herself, as the Shadow Chancellor used to say, this is a shameless tax on working people. Apparently, it could raise £5.8 billion by 2029-30 by freezing thresholds. And Rathbones are warned that if you freeze threshold, those earning over £100,000 will see an extra £7,000 in tax. Now, by the way, listeners, many of you won't earn over £100,000. I don't. And I will totally understand why many of you will go, well, I don't care about them. They've got enough to stomach this. People with wealth have the ability to move, ability to put money into other places and not into the UK economy. We've already seen a flight of millionaires in this country. And actually what you should be worried about is that 1.4 million extra people could go into the 40p tax rate. And you only need to be earning around £50,000 or 50,200, I think it is, pounds. So that's a lot of teachers in the sort of the middle of their careers, or middle leaders. That's a lot of nurses who have maybe become matrons of their wards. That's also a lot of sparkies, plumbers who have been working hard and obviously, you know, have maybe paid themselves through dividends, but we know that Rachel Reeves is probably eyeing that up to equalise that with income tax at some stage. I mean, this is another broken promise by Labour, and it's just more sign that no matter what Labour tries to tell us, Duncan, this autumn in Rachel Reeves' budget, they'll try the sleight of hand to say they've not raised tax, but this is a tax rise.
Of course it is. She's really stuck, and we've got years of this to come, right, unless there's some kind of political revolution in this country, obviously a peaceful one. She is going to scratch around to try and find money, because for the first year of this Labour government, the economy has been massively mismanaged. They've tried along the way to reduce spending. I mean, look at what they tried to do with the welfare bill. And there was a massive backlash from backbench MPs, and of course that ended up, so we saw a marvellously stoic and robust Prime Minister stare down his backbench Labour MPs. No, he didn't. He did a U-turn. You know, they tried to save some cash. They haven't.
By the way, Duncan, what was even worse about that one, it was on the floor of the House. I remember Labour MPs saying, what's going on? That I think one Labour MP, Ian Lavery, said that this bill was worth 8 pages. I think now it had been reduced to 2 by the time that the bill actually got voted on.
Exactly. It's just another example of weak leadership. But going back to this, we're going to see an autumn budget, and they're going to come after the people who are already paying a vast amount of tax for all kinds of different reasons. And, you know, fair to say, the Conservatives could have done more.
A terrible legacy, highest tax burden in history.
Exactly. Highest amount of tax. People who get out of bed in the morning, work hard, they graft, they want to get a better life for themselves and their family, and those people will be the ones that Rachel Reeves comes after. And increasingly, I talk to people who say to me in my local pub, because I do like going to the pub occasionally, Jonathan, they just go, I just don't know why I bother some days. I get out of bed at 6:30 in the morning, do the school kids' lunchbox and stuff, we do the school run, I'm at my desk by 8 because I go in early morning to the school for some kind of club or whatever, and I'm doing this or I'm delivering stuff here, and they just find themselves thinking, I don't know why I bother. And I think that view is quite prevalent increasingly amongst a lot of people. And it's those people that Rachel Reeves is going to target. And just going back to the other point that you made, wealthy people are earning, you know, in excess of £100,000 a year, and I don't earn that either. But those people do matter because they are the wealth creators. So those people, not exclusively, but a big chunk of them will also be running businesses. And if they feel that Britain is going after them and it's not a welcome place to run a business anymore, they will disappear. And the ripple effects from that are vast.
Well, and the one little other fun story, which I'll just quickly read out for listeners' sake, is that in the Telegraph, they've got some good little stories, the Telegraph here. The Office for Value for Money, by the way, ladies and gents, Labour set it up last autumn. It's going to close in less than a year. That probably sums up, if you ever wanted a picture of this Labour government. And it's cost you £1.6 million. So it was set up to save money. It's closing in under a year. It's cost you £1.6 million, but don't worry. The government claims it delivered £14 billion of efficiency savings per year. I'm going to call BS on that. I'll see you after the break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Here, the home of common sense. That is Talk. I'm Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the amazing Alex Phillips at Weekend Breakfast. Wow, you've been texting, you've been calling, you've been voice noting, and I'm going to remind you how more of you can continue to do it, and that's by calling us on 0344 499 1000. You can also WhatsApp that number as well to have your message read out, or indeed send us a voice note, which is what I'd prefer to have, because it's just good to hear from you directly, and many of you are far more articulate than I am, particularly this time of the morning. You can also text in with the word Talk at the start of your message to 87222, and you can follow us on messages on X at talkTV. I'm delighted again still to be joined by Duncan Barks, broadcaster, in the studio with me. We go to a story that's dominating both the front page of The Sun and the Daily Mail today, which is Rayner has apparently bought herself a third pad. Now, I think the story's slightly disingenuous, because I think that she's actually got one property in Ashton-under-Lyme, albeit one that she bought for $375,000, now estimated to be worth $650,000. She has now bought this seaside apartment near Brighton for over $700,000. I've got a friend who lives around there, says he's looking forward to meeting his new neighbour soon. But I do think the other property is a grace and favour pad that government ministers get if they're in senior positions. She is obviously the Deputy Prime Minister, and it's Admiralty House, where she is able to stay in an apartment there. Now, look, I'm not going to bash her for having Admiralty House. I do think that, you know, if you're a Deputy Prime Minister, you should be entitled to some sort of property, particularly with all the security that will be required to keep you safe. So I'm not going to demonise any minister, because, quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, if I was the Deputy Prime Minister and I was offered a pad at Admiralty House, I'd take it. So I'm not going to be a hypocrite in that regard. But I will say the problem is Angela Rayner's history politically has been very much against people who have second homes. In fact, she used to support curbing second home ownership through tax reforms. Obviously, Labour have been bashing people buying properties by the seaside in places like Devon and Cornwall, saying that it prices out local people from the local market. So there is a bit of a hypocrisy issue here. A bit
of hypocrisy. This is rank hypocrisy. I agree with you in so much as, you know, let's put it into context how many properties she has the right to stay at. And you're right, because of her job, she has a grace and favour pad she can use, and that's right and proper. And I have no issue whatsoever with any human being doing what they can to improve their lot in life, right? I think we should all support that. That's as far as it goes. However, here comes the but. The but is the optics of this are just so shocking. And I think it gets us into this area. It's the worst kind of champagne socialism, which is do as I say, not as I do. As you alluded to, only a few years ago, she was going after people buying second homes in Devon and Cornwall. This is someone, as Deputy Prime Minister, who is in the process of reforming the council tax system in this country in a way that the shorthand, people in the south are going to end up paying more to finance councils in the north. That's what she wants to do. That's going to impact people like me. I live just down the road from Hove, not too far away. I live in Chichester.
You might see her floating around on one of these inflatable canoes.
I might see her floating, and I might get my my pin out and stab the dinghy or the lilo, or whatever she's on. But seriously, for a second, you know, you look at this and you just go, you're about to implement council tax rises as a result of your because she has the local government portfolio, because of that portfolio, because of your changes, and people see this and then they see you with your lovely new pad in Hove, and people just think you're taking the mick. The other thing, and again, I used the phrase earlier, it comes back to Labour's DNA. You remember John Prescott, a staunch socialist, right, a massive man in the trade union movement before he became an MP. He had his Jag. Two Jags. Prescott, he had his Jag for ministerial work, and he bought a Jag. And again, you kind of go, I don't have a problem, John, when you were alive, having a Jag, you've done well for yourself. But to then preach to people that we must pay more tax, we must do this, we must do that, in order to make the world or the country more fair and a level playing field, you're taking the mick. And I think the majority of people watching and listening to us this morning will draw the same conclusion.
I do feel, though, ironically, there's been photos of her, obviously, on this holiday. I think one where she's wearing some coat on the beach and then she's sipping a glass of wine.
It's the dry robe, isn't it? The dry robe. 165 quid dry robe.
And then another photo of her here, I think, having a puff on her vape. Yeah. As she's enjoying time. Do you know what, though? I like it because it just shows that she's a normal person. And I think I think that I see some sort of on the right of British politics sort of trying to demonise her for this. I actually think it shows that she's probably one of the few in this Labour government who's probably actually in touch with working voters.
So here's the
working people. Albeit, obviously, we know that the mysteriously leaked letter that went to Rachel Reeves with ideas on, which in the Telegraphable papers, which she obviously, Angela Rayner, vehemently denies had anything to do with her. Sort of, some would say, was a sort of a manifesto for a future leadership bid.
So I think, and you raise a really interesting point, that there's something Angela Rayner has in terms of a personal quality that I think she shares with Nigel Farage.
Yes, agreed.
Right, there's an element of, and I don't know how to phrase this in the correct way, so I won't bother, but she connects with people in the way that Farage does, and there's a bit of the kind of what I call my benchmark when I work in politics or indeed broadcasting and I talk about it, is would you have a pint with these people? I definitely have a pint with Nigel Farage, and I have had several times over the decades.
You're still here to tell the stories. I mean, this is well, it's never one, is it, with Nigel?
You need a couple of days to recover. With Angela Rayner, I definitely have a pint with Angela Rayner.
I think it'd be a good laugh.
And I share none of her politics whatsoever, but she's got that personal element that Farage has. So whilst the Mail and the Sun are rightly highlighting this story on their front pages this morning and talking about hypocrisy, I think they're right to do so. I think the optics are appalling, but I think Rayner should be less damaged by this compared to potentially other Labour politicians.
I agree with you, and like you say, I always do the would I have a beer with them test, and Angela Rayner is one that I think would be a cracking laugh on a night out. I think she's got, I've got to know her during my time as MP. She's got a really good sense of humour. She did a dinner for Westminster correspondents. I happened to be in the room as a guest of one of them, as sort of a Conservative representative, because obviously an unsubtle spy, I think it's fair to say, to see what she was saying. And she saw me and cracked a few jokes in my direction off the cuff, and they were very good. And it was also well-natured, and I had a lot of time for it. One of them was I supported, for example, some of the things that she said. And she messaged me to say, well, thanks very much for putting the bullet in that piece of legislation ever going through, because you've endorsed it. To the point where I will say this, last year at Labour conference, I've obviously just lost the election. I've got a friend who was there on business at Labour Party conference up in Liverpool, just up the road from Stoke-on-Trent. I was out having lunch with them, and I saw in the restaurant Angela Rayner. Now, she's there with all her aides, who obviously must have looked at me like one of the spawns of Satan.
Yes.
She, however, called me over and kindly invited me to join her at the table, caught up with me, and very sweetly asked, how are you doing? I must know it must be tough. I hope you're okay. And I thought, you didn't have to do that. You're Deputy Prime Minister. You're at Labour Party conference. Your aides are probably wondering why you're even bothering to look at this right-wing fascist, as probably they think. And yet she was so sweet and so kind. So I must say to people, whilst the hypocrisy is rank, absolutely, and I will happily call out Angela on things, I do think on that sniff test, she's one that you can
I think you're right. It's good to hear your story. I mean, I saw her once outside the Red Lion pub in Whitehall, so listeners and viewers have context. That's a pub right outside the Palace of Westminster. I saw her with, who was the Transport Secretary who had a lot of mobile phones? Louise Haigh.
Yes.
Both having a vape and having a pint. Angela Rayner downed that pint within about 3 minutes. I'm not suggesting there's any issue with that whatsoever. I was just like thinking, this woman knows how to drink. So yeah, I'm with you on the Rayner.
I tell you what, Doug. If we have in the next general election, let's not have Keir Starmer on the debate stage. If we're going to have national televised debates, let's get Nigel and Angela. That would be a good.
I've got a better idea. Let's put them in front of a bar somewhere and see who can out-pint each other.
That would be great, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that just be fun? I think people, if you want people to tune into politics, you've got to have the personalities. I think, to be fair, Wes Streeting's got enough personality that he would also be entertaining in a debate, albeit I don't know if I would be as keen to have a pint with Wes as I would be with Angela. But I suspect he's probably got a lot more fun in him than, let's say, Bridget Phillips, who I think would send me to sleep.
Yeah, well, that would be quite a depressing experience, I think. See, I can imagine having 8 pints with Angela Rayner and a kebab afterwards, but not with Bridget.
Yes.
You see what I mean?
Well, unless obviously Lord Ali's funding her the £14,000 holiday bash, birthday bash that Bridget Phillips enjoyed. Now, look, listeners, after the break, we're going to be going into this quite fascinating, long interview by Charlotte Ivers in The Times with Kemi Badenoch. Headline being, racists say, I reached the top because I'm black. Do you agree? We'll see you after the break.
London's police force is completely and utterly wrapped up in dealing with that. So it's a great weekend to be a burglar, because you know there's no police anywhere near South London, for example. You don't have to worry about that. If you want to go anywhere near and rob anybody down sort of in North London, that's going to be fine too, because they're all at Notting Hill. You know, the whole thing is a complete disaster, and they're all terrified of saying this thing is a waste of space, it creates criminality, it encourages people to fight the police, and it should be shut down because, quite frankly, it's not even British.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the amazing Alex Phillips here on Weekend Breakfast. We go straight into our next story, which is on the front page of the Times, a big exclusive with the Sunday Times, with Kemi Badenoch, an interview where she's talked about, well, a wide range of topics. I'm delighted still to be joined in the studio by Duncan Barks, broadcaster. I mean, Duncan, it's quite an extraordinary interview. When I read these things, I must confess, I always try and understand what's the point of the interview. I read it, I still don't really get the point, unless it's almost a pushback against what was the New Statesman hit piece that was done on Kemi Badenoch not so long ago. But she said that people who spread the fake stories and the lies and the smears are to blame for... Over the course of the time I spend with the Leader of the Opposition, a non-exhaustive list of these haters will include people who, quote, blame you for things that are going wrong, even when it's got nothing to do with you. People who spread, quote, the fake stories, the lies and the smears. She calls Nigel Farage, and I apologise for Ofcom reasons, but I'm directly quoting the Leader of His Majesty Opposition. She calls Nigel Farage a bullshit artist. And it says Keir Starmer, who at PMQs is screaming things in desperation because he doesn't have a plan, and whose mind is sort of blank. And think plotters within her own party who want to see her replaced by her former leadership rival Robert Jenrick are, quote, sore losers who think this is a game. I mean, just sounds like quite an angry, ranty interview.
The interview was done by Charlotte Ivers, who's a really, really good journalist. Yes. And she spent some time with Kemi Badenoch on the Isle of Wight, I believe, in Ryde, where she was doing some campaigning. It's a very wide-ranging interview, but I agree with you. I don't know what I'm supposed to take away from this. And the headline that Charlotte Ivers has presumably written or sanctioned, along with the headline writers of the Times, is this idea that she was talking to Charlotte and makes the point that racists say I reached the top because I'm black. And that's not the main headline that you want to see after a big interview that's appeared in the Sunday Times newspaper. I think...
I just don't think people think it, Duncan. I've never heard it. Look, I'm not saying there aren't vile people out there who push stuff online, but I did a lot of door knocking in those local elections. No one ever brought up her ethnicity with me on doors in Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, where, by the way, Stoke-on-Trent did have once 9 BNP councillors. So, you know, I'd say it's an area, if you might come across one or two morons, but they weren't any of that day.
But I think this is social media. I think she's talking about the reaction and the bile she gets on social media. And I've seen it. It's abhorrent. It's nasty. And it's a hardcore of people who have an issue with the fact that she is a black female leading the Conservative Party. But I don't think it represents the majority of people in this country by any stretch of the imagination.
In Stoke-on-Trent, people bring her up as just being, in their eyes, they don't even know who she is. And the ones who do relatively like what she says, but I think they just don't believe the Conservative Party. And as you say, I think she talks about those online who push the ethno-nationality stuff, which I just find abhorrent. The idea that you can't be British or English because you're not technically white if you're born in this country. I mean, look, I think the overwhelming majority of this country doesn't care what anyone's ethnicity is. They just want you to integrate in our society. And as far as they're concerned, if you're born here, you're British. Doesn't matter what your heritage or background is. So, which is why I always found it weird that Kemi Badenoch has again repeated the whole thing that she no longer identifies as being Nigerian, even though obviously her parents are Nigerian. I mean, I just don't know who's asking that question, or if that's even a serious thing to even be said.
I don't think anyone is asking this question, and my heart sank a few months into her role when she was talking about that sandwiches aren't real food and she has a steak for lunch. It's such a distraction. I don't care. Nobody cares. What I'm depressed about, as someone who has knocked around broadcasting, media and communications in politics for a good couple of decades now, is great you're doing an interview, but you only do an interview with the Sunday Times magazine, which is a great platform to feature in and to be on, if you've got something you really want to hammer home. And having gone through this interview this morning, I don't see what the key message is. No. You only do this kind of stuff if, for example, Kemi Badenoch has decided that the Conservative Party's position is to leave the ECHR, right? Then this would be the perfect time to do an interview like this. And
the headline would be following it.
Exactly. So I don't want to get personal, because I think I know who's responsible for her comms, but this is embarrassing. It's a wasted opportunity. And the headline that's on the front page of the Sunday Times magazine and the front page of the Sunday Times newspaper this morning, really, it's not the one you want.
What's weird is she's in the Isle of Wight. Yep. She's got Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor. Yep. Rather than turning this, maybe, let's like you say, into a bit of background on her, her life with her children and her husband, which, you know, people and politicians are allowed to have fluff pieces. Of course. But then what's the policy area? Well, attack Labour on either migration, which maybe the Conservatives think is a bit difficult because of their own record, but then the economy's the big gaping hole that even Reform aren't fully filling, and yet she's got Mel Stride next to her, and they both don't choose to make this and a big attack on Labour about to crash the economy. And instead we get into, the personal attack on Nigel Farage, which I suggest is just her being quite rattled.
Well, just to pick up on that, just moving on from the Farage point for a second, because I want to come back to that. You're absolutely right. The Isle of Wight is a place I know relatively well, having worked there for a couple of years running a radio station, is a place that its economy is 100% driven by tourism, right? She could have used this opportunity to say all of these businesses based on this island are being hammered because of Labour's current economic policies, which we talked about earlier. Shadow Chancellor there to back her up. I don't read any of this.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. What do you think? Is Kemi Badenoch the leader of the Conservative Party you want to see at the next general election? Do you believe that she reached the top because... do you think racists are saying that she reached the top because she's black? Do you care what the Conservative Party have to say? You coming back and tell us after the break. 0344 499 1000. Text in the word talk at the start of your message to 87222 and message and follow us on X at talkTV. We'll see you shortly for the second hour of this great show.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us because, as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, Great Britain. Jonathan Gullis sitting in for the amazing Alex Phillips on Weekend Breakfast on here, the home of common sense. That is Talk, and we want to keep hearing from you. We've had Pierre text in, love your show. Thank you so much, Pierre. Another person, Jackie, text in. Again, Starmer doesn't get it. It's sticking plaster politics. When they arrive on our shores, our border policy has failed to stop them rising. That's in relation to Keir Starmer's big announcement that he's going to curb appeals when it comes to asylum cases. Another one here from Tony saying the UK is heading towards civil war. Well, we don't want that. We never want violence on the streets at all. Only Nigel Farage and President Trump can stop it happening. The Uni Party are despised by voters. And another one from Tony: Boris Johnson opened the floodgates to illegal migration. Shameful there. Lots of you texting in, and you know how to. You can message us on WhatsApp, you can voice note us, and you can call us on 0344 499 1000. You can text in the word talk at the start of your text message to 87222, and you can follow us and message on X at talkTV. I'm delighted to still have Duncan Barks, broadcaster, in the studio with me as we go through the front pages. A very striking one, very quickly. Powerful image on the front page of The Observer of the protest outside the Bell Hotel in Epping. All I will say, however, is the piece actually is looking at, number one, the anger that's being felt by local people, questioning where that is being fueled by. And Kat Neelan, who is a very good investigative journalist, has looked into Nigel Farage and his money, claiming that a £280,000 payment to the MP for promotional work raises questions over the lack of clarity in the register of interest. For Paul Withers, co-founder of the precious metals trader Direct Bullion, the decision to hand Nigel Farage £280,000 for recording a handful of promotional adverts was easy. I wanted him, said Withers. There was no plan B. It was either Nigel or no one. I'd love to know, Duncan, very quickly on this. Do you think there's going to be any this is going to be the thing that sees off Nigel Farage?
No, he's declared it, right? He's gone in the register of interest, so as long as he's done that, I think that's perfectly fine. I mean, it's a little bit... it's not every day that you have a serving MP who will advertise buy gold now using this particular company. But, you know, he's not broken any rules and stuff. And actually, you know what? It bounces off in this kind of stuff. I don't think, as long as he's not found to have broken the law, and there's no suggestion that he has, he's declared that he does this bit of work, he gets paid handsomely for it, let him crack on. And I think most people will just see it as an establishment, particularly parts of the media, who are frightened of the rise of reform, trying to find anything that they can, you know, use to land a blow on Farage. And I think we're going to see more and more of this. I mean, we know that Downing Street has set up an attack unit to go after Nigel Farage.
Taxpayer money.
There's going to be smears. There's going to be stuff going on because there's a genuine fear, not just from the Labour government, but also the Conservative Party as well, as to what Reform UK potentially could do when it comes to an earthquake in British politics. What I would say is that the work that they've got cut out ahead of them is to sustain that poll lead for the next 2 to 3 years. And you know more than most people, politics can change overnight.
Exactly. Well, let's see what happens there. We've also got on the front page here another story that will drive readers balmy. We've got the Sunday Express has gone on its front page here. Border farce, outrage at bonus payouts. Ladies and gentlemen, you won't believe this, but despite the fact that Labour has had a record 111,000 claim asylum in just 1 year, top civil servants in the Home Office have pocketed a huge pay rise and bonus despite Britain's migrant crisis spiralling out of control. Some mandarins saw their salaries rise by as much as 24% last year, while some raked in a £15,000 bonus. Martin Hewitt, Labour's Bordy security commander, is the highest paid civil servant at the Home Office with a salary of £200,000. I mean,
it's nuts, isn't it?
I mean, what is there to say, right, on that?
Oh, there's a lot to say. Let's have a good crack at it. So, in what world does anyone think this works? If this was the private sector, and you'd set me a target to do something, Jonathan, and you said, Duncan, I want you to stop these people getting into this bit of land here, and I failed, and at my end of year assessment, dramatically, and you were good enough not to sack me, but if I was to say, but can I have my bonus anyway, you're having a laugh, aren't you? You can get another job. I don't want someone like you working for me. Yet here we have people in the Home Office, the border force, responsible presumably for stopping people entering this country illegally, who have failed at their job. They're pocketing bonuses, and this is a problem that you see in the public sector when it's not someone's money, it's taxpayers' money. There's zero accountability. I used to work for the BBC for 6 years. It's the same mindset, right? I used to do a late-night radio phone-in on a radio station based in London, and the amount of waste you see within the BBC because it's not their money. So they look at it in a very, very different way. And it's the same with the public sector. It's not their money, it's taxpayers' money, but it's not coming out of their own bank account. So do you know what? So, you have a bonus. Crack on. How much would you like?
Well, listeners, do you think that the bonuses and pay rise for the Home Office was a good value for money? 0344 499 1000 if you want to text in via WhatsApp, send us a voice note or indeed make a phone call to tell us whether you're happy to see such a thing. You can obviously also text 87222, the word talk, and start a message, and you can follow and messages on X at talkTV. Civil servants getting huge bonuses and payouts. Who would have thought it, hey? But don't worry, private sector. You're the evil guys here, but we're going to tax you more, and we're going to pay people who fail even more as well in the civil service. What a great start!
Wouldn't it be great if we made it performance related?
Well, why not?
In the Home Office, in the Border Force, just like you can have a bonus, but you need to cut these crossings by half. Crack on.
I agree with you. At the junior level, you can always say, look, like anything else, you have an entry level fee, and there's a sort of standardised rise. But once you enter easily director level of the civil service, then you should suddenly go on performance-related pay, because ultimately you can have a base salary, and then you're told there's huge perks here if you deliver on the government's agenda. And again, all you're meant to be doing is following the instructions of ministers. So if the policy ends up failing, it's not the civil servant's fault, it's the minister's fault. But as long as the civil servant implemented what the minister wanted, then you can say, well, I did my bit.
I think it's only a matter of time we should be running the Home Office, Jonathan.
I tell you what, there would be a whole-scale reform in that place, because that is an absolute shower. And we've also got Nigel Farage again making the news again on the front page of the Telegraph, which is quite extraordinary. I can't think of a time the leader of an opposition party's had such an opportunity. But Nigel Farage is going to go to the United States of America, not to meet up with his buddy Donald Trump, but he's actually going to go and testify in Washington to members of Congress about the threats to freedom of speech in the United Kingdom. And he's going to be explicitly explaining Lucy Connolly's story. He's expected to bring up the case of Mrs. Connolly, who was released from prison last week after being jailed for 31 months over a social media post. He said the case of Mrs. Connolly, who after her release described herself as a political prisoner, would be a, quote, very central point of what I'm discussing. I mean, it's not exactly going to be helpful for the Labour Party when Nigel Farage is in Washington grabbing headlines stateside and then bringing those headlines back with him this side of the shores.
No, and it's another headache for Kemi Badenoch, isn't it? Because you could argue it should be her backing Lucy Connolly here as the official leader of the opposition. Listen, I've seen excerpts of the interview she did when she was released. She was put inside for 31 months. We all know the backstory. She tweeted something that was vile. It was abhorrent. She realised it. She deleted it after a few hours. There is a view, and she was of the view, that she took bad legal advice, presumably from a duty solicitor, when she was arrested. But I believe she was a political prisoner, because the moment that the public got onto this, and we talked about it extensively here at Talk, got onto this, Starmer could not back down, right? So she had to serve, I think it was 40% of her sentence before she could get released. This woman will be a headache for Keir Starmer going forward, and rightly so. He deserves it.
I do think she's become a martyr, and like you say, the tweet was disgusting and abhorrent. She herself acknowledged that. And I think the problem is, for those who bemoan people like you and me saying that she shouldn't have been in prison, they're saying, well, she pleaded guilty and her tweet was vile. Look, you've got to separate the two things here. No one disagrees that I've spoken to that the tweet was somehow appropriate. Actually, everyone agrees that it was inappropriate.
Condemned it.
Everyone's condemned it. She herself has condemned it. But the sentence that she received was so wholly disproportionate when literal paedophiles like you, Edwards, who had indecent images of children, were allowed bail and were allowed a suspended sentence, whilst Lucy Connolly, for one tweet, deleted 4 hours later, and which she apologised for before even going before the police, ended up landing her time behind bars. At the same time, Labour were releasing 1,700 offenders, some of whom have committed knife crime, drug-related offences, harassment,
early release.
sex
We
assault.
saw the pictures, didn't we? They're coming out of the
champagne corks being popped.
and sports cars picking them up. I mean, just a shout out here to the Free Speech Union, who have backed Lucy Connolly. I think it's led by Lord Toby Young, isn't it? They've done really good work here in supporting her, and I think this is the next part of the story, with Farage taking Connolly's case to Congress. And you know, who would have thought it? Keir Starmer's decision to keep this woman in prison is going to come back and haunt him, but not just on a domestic level, a global level, because this is going straight to the USA.
Well, here we go. And then we've got another story inside of The Sun, page 2. Shoplifters face ban from footy. Criminals face football and pub bans under tough community punishment laws. Judges are getting new powers to prevent offenders, including shoplifters and sex pests, doing things they enjoy, such as going to matches or gigs and travelling abroad. Courts will also be able to slap them with driving limits and prevent them going to specific areas. Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood, who famously signed a letter to keep foreign national offenders in this country when she was in opposition with Sir Keir Starmer, is quoted as saying, "With the football season back in full swing, I know the Sun on Sunday readers nationwide will be back on the terraces this weekend. But if you're a criminal who loves the game, we're bringing in new laws to hit you where it hurts. Judges will have new powers to ban offenders from matches, leaving the stands for law-abiding fans. Courts will be able to take away more freedoms, banning offenders from sports, gigs, pubs and holidays. The message is simple: break the law and we'll take away the things you love. I mean, Shabana Mahmood is very good at doing the comms at the moment. We had chemical castration for paedophiles floated at one stage. But I mean, do we believe it? Do we actually... How are we going to actually prove, again, as we've always said, right, the sniff test now with this Labour government, whether they like it or not, is going to be they have to actually make people want to do it, and then people have to see it to believe it, because so many people now no longer trust this government and its word. I mean, do you really think we're going to... How easy, or do you reckon we're going to see shoplifters being banned from footing?
Well, this is Labour trying to be tough on crime, isn't it? And we don't have to think too far back to when Sir Keir Starmer's spokesperson was asked about the term scum in relation to shoplifters. Remember that guy? He's got a shop in Wales, and he put up a note about scum shoplifters, and the spokesperson for the Prime Minister said, oh, we wouldn't use that kind of word. And there lies the problem. They talk a good game here, but the reality is remarkably different. I'm sick to the back teeth of shoplifting. I see it. I've got a Co-op store near me. I've mentioned it before. They've got packets of sausages now in Perspex boxes with GPS trackers to stop people nicking them. I've seen people walk into stores and literally take stuff off the shelves, and it's just embarrassing. And if you tolerate that kind of stuff, then it just leads to bigger crime. I'm very old school, Jonathan, in case you've not worked it out. I come from a part of the country that's a little bit countrified. There's a farm shop near me who rightly has started up putting up big pictures, A4 pictures of people who have been shoplifting.
Well, that's a good idea.
It's brilliant. It's fantastic. So what they've done is they're taking a still off the CCTV.
Shaming the individual.
And they stick them in the front window of the shop, just going, this person shoplifts. They drive a silver Mercedes. And we need more of this. We need humiliation.
It's sad that it's taking shopkeepers to actually have to do this, where the police should be following up. But as you say, the Conservative Party, whether they like it or not, offences for less than £200, it was widely reported that supermarkets weren't getting any investigations. They were just being sent a crime number so they could go and claim it against their insurance. And then, of course, under this Labour government, releasing people over and over again onto the streets, so an early release to free up prison space, and talking tough, but people are actually yet to see or feel.
And there's a mindset,
difference.
isn't it? It's just like, oh, well, it's only a couple of packets of steak or whatever. But you've got to remember, this impacts on business. It comes back to the conversation we had in the last hour. And ultimately, who does it affect? It affects law-abiding, paying customers like you and I, because if people go on the rob and start shoplifting stuff, that shop, that business has a loss. They have to make up the loss. And what do? They put their prices up.
And then a big story again in The Sun here, page 6 and 7. Strictly arrest shot, claim of intimate image abuse. We've got here, flagship BBC show Strictly Come Dancing has been plunged into a fresh crisis after one of its stars was arrested on suspicion of rape. The male suspect is also being quizzed by police over allegations involving non-consensual intimate image abuse. The Metropolitan Police investigation comes after a BBC-led inquiry into claims of drug abuse by stars on the show. A Met spokesperson told The Sun on Sunday, on Friday, August 22nd, officers arrested a man on suspicion of rape and non-consensual intimate image abuse. This is a joint investigation with Hertfordshire Constabulary, and while the investigation is in its early stages, we urge anyone with any information to come forward to us. The arrest follows a third-party allegation of sexual and drug-related offences. Inquiries are ongoing. I mean, the BBC just seems to go from one crisis to the next when it comes to their stars, doesn't it?
It does. So I think if this person actually gets charged and convicted, I think the shelf life of Strictly Come Dancing is going to be remarkably limited, because it's not the first time there's been some kind of scandal related to this show. But you're absolutely right. The BBC and the production companies it uses to produce certain shows, the presenters they hire, they've got a massive problem. It doesn't matter if it's homegrown talent like Hugh Edwards, who you mentioned earlier, or people who have been presenting MasterChef. Somewhere along the line, there are some wrong-uns that are being hired. There's no other way of, there's no other term to use. There is a problem, and ultimately, if it's homegrown talent in the BBC therefore are somehow culpable because it's within that culture. If it's a production company using people, and it happens a lot, people listening at the moment or watching might not know, but not every programme the BBC shows comes from the BBC. They might use a company to make it or whatever. But ultimately, the buck stops with the BBC because they're using licence fee payers' money to pay that production company, and part of that is having oversight. So if you're using a presenter who's, you got someone like Greg Wallace, who it appears can't behave properly around females or whatever, the BBC are partly responsible for that.
And then final story is in the Daily Mail, page 6. Voters urge PM to axe Reeves because she's not up to it, building on what we discussed earlier. A total of 43% think Miss Reeves should be removed from the Treasury, while just 19% think she should stay in post to deliver the autumn budget when she expected to hike taxes again to fill a widening black hole. The research by former Conservative Deputy Chairman Lord Ashcroft found that even many Labour voters, more than 1 in 5, want the Prime Minister to fire his Chancellor. Quite extraordinary here. So, as I say, should the Prime Minister sack Rachel Reeves? 43% yes, 19% no. Will Keir Starmer still be Labour leader in a year's time? Only 35% yes, 34% said no. Interesting that there's a very split there. Kemi Badenoch might not enjoy this news. Will she be Tory leader in a year's time? 20% yes, 38% no. Will Nigel Farage still be Reform leader in a year's time? Shock horror, 59% say yes, 9% no.
Wow.
And then the one here, is Labour better or worse than the last Conservative government? I'm going to suggest to Labour MPs this will be the one that should worry you most. Better, 23%. Worse, 39%. I mean, I didn't think that was possible, but hey.
There's a lot of stuff to chew over there. So a couple of things very quickly. The Nigel Farage thing, who's going to replace him, right? There's no one there. Without Farage, Reform UK, I'm sorry to say it, it might upset some people listening, without Farage, Reform UK in its current form pretty much ceases to exist. Rachel Reeves, I think she'll be gone inside the next 18 months.
Yeah.
Starmer will use her as a scapegoat, right? He'll sacrifice her because he has to.
Completely agree.
Right? So that's going to happen. In terms of replacing Starmer, I've been thinking about this. I've got a bet on. I don't mind sharing this with you. So a lot of the political commentators just go, well, it's probably Angela Rayner versus Wes Streeting, right? Those seem to be the strong contenders. Possibly Andy Burnham, if he can become an MP again, but that's quite a big ask. Ditto Sadiq Khan. So if you look at people who are existing MPs, who are in the cabinet, who could replace Starmer, I think the Rayner and Streeting camps will cancel each other out because of the scrapping that will go on. I think Yvette Cooper will come through the centre.
Wow, there you go. Are we about to see Ed Balls as first husband?
Oh no! Make it stop.
Make it stop indeed. And Yvette Cooper somehow come through the middle. That will be quite extraordinary, and you must hopefully got good odds on that one. As well. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. What a great show we've had so far with a friend here on Talk, Duncan Barks, broadcaster. Thank you so much for joining us on the show so far. And ladies and gentlemen, after the break, you'll never guess what. There's fury, and rightly so, by the way, as British Paralympians turn their backs during the Israeli national anthem. Who on earth do they think they are? That's next.
The minute you say anything that it should be changed or it should be looked at, you're called racist. But we've got to the point, some of us, haven't we, where we think, blow it, I don't care, call me what you like. The truth is, in the next 5 years, Notting Hill Carnival will cost the taxpayers between 80 and 100 million pounds. Which, you know, how can we afford that when we're reducing policing in our city at a time when we should be increasing policing in our city?
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the amazing Alex Phillips here on Weekend Breakfast. We've had Duncan Barks taking us through all the front pages and some of the stories inside them. We now go to more stories inside the front page. Pardon me, sorry. This next one is anger after British Paralympians turned backs on Israeli team. Page 26 of the Daily Mail with a photo there, or a screen grab, of the Great British basketball team, wheelchair basketball team, committing what's been quoted as a hugely offensive behaviour after they turned their backs during the Israeli national anthem. The players appeared to turn away from the podium as the Israeli flag was raised and the Hadvika was played. The incident, branded an attack on the dignity of their opponents, Israel took place last weekend during the opening ceremony of the National Wheelchair Basketball Nations Cup in Cologne, Germany. It was thought to be a protest over Israel's military campaign in Gaza. The Israeli Paralympic Committee has lodged a complaint with the International Wheelchair Basketball Federation calling for sanctions on athletes who repeat the gesture. Committee Chairman Moshe Matalon, branded the conduct shameful and against the spirit of Paralympic sport. Former Labour MP Lord Austin condemned the act as a hugely offensive gesture and it brings shame on the British team. I'm delighted to be joined now down the line by Gary Mond from the National Jewish Assembly. Hello, Gary, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you very much for coming on. And I must say, I am absolutely disgusted and appalled that if it does turn out that this was some sort of act of a protest against Israel over a war that, as I keep repeating, and I actually have got a petition now, by the way, Gary, against me to be ousted as the mayor of Kidsgrove Parish, because I dare to say this war started because Hamas invaded Israel on the 7th of October 2023, butchered, murdered and raped over 1,400 innocent men, women and children, took 200 hostages, of which 50 are still in the terror tunnels built off the billions of foreign aid that was being sent to Gaza for many, many years, whilst their leaders live in Qatari luxury, whilst their people have been left to fend for themselves. And ultimately, if Israel does not defend itself, Hamas has made it abundantly clear. They not only want to wipe Israel off the map, they want to kill every Jew along with it too. I mean, what on earth does this British Paralympian team think they're doing? They're meant to represent all of Great Britain, and the Jewish community who live in this country must feel very upset and hurt to think that people that their taxes are helping to fund to give them the opportunities in life are being turned against them. It's singling people out, isn't it?
Yes, it is, but I think there's a much more fundamental problem, and that is that the interface, on the one hand, between sport and entertainment, and on the other hand, politics, which goes back 50 years, has always been a problem. Ever since British teams wouldn't compete against apartheid South Africa, ever since the Americans boycotted the Soviet Olympics in 1980, coming right up to the present day when we see prominent politicians like the Prime Minister taking the knee to Black Lives Matter, we've had this interaction which needs to be stopped worldwide. And this is just another sickening example of it. Politics must get out of sport and get out of entertainment.
I just don't understand how on earth anyone, particularly the Olympics, I mean, you and I remember this, maybe these people need educating on the wheelchair basketball team of Great Britain, the 1972 Summer Olympics in Munich, where Palestinian militant organisation Black September literally murdered Israeli athletes. I mean, literally, yes. Jewish and Israeli representatives have lost their lives representing their country at an Olympic Games, and yet these clowns think it's perfectly acceptable to stage some sort of faux outrage protest in order to grab a cheap headline over a war they clearly don't understand anything about. Because, as I say, Hamas have run Gaza since 2005. It's Hamas's responsibility. By the way, every ceasefire that's ever been conducted since then, guess who breaks it? Hamas, when they fire rockets into Israel. What happened when we had the initial war and the first ceasefire? It was Hamas who then fired rockets. And when Hamas were dealt with, Hezbollah, also Iranian state terror funded, were firing in rockets into Israel as well. Israel is at war in order to literally have the right to breathe and survive. And the fact that people don't understand that is abhorrent.
That's completely correct. And the main way we're going to solve the problem eventually is the complete re-education of the Palestinian population in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria. There is no other alternative. Israel has to finish this war. It has to destroy Hamas at whatever price. Netanyahu is behaving in the interests of the whole of Israel, even though some of his domestic opponents might not see it that way. There is no alternative to wiping out Hamas and indeed all their supporters. And of course, one point one has to think about is, to what extent do Gazans actually support Hamas? I have no doubt that on the 7th of October 2023, the overwhelming majority of them did. We've never seen cases of any Gazans actually try to help the Israelis with regard to identifying where the hostages are. During the Second World War, in the time of Nazi Germany, there were some righteous German people who tried to help Jews where they could. The same has not applied in this war at all, which means to say that we feel that the whole of Gaza is really supporting Hamas, even though recently less so because Hamas has been losing, their support has eroded. But on the whole, it is a major fundamental problem.
And isn't it disgraceful that we live in a world where too much of our mainstream media, let alone our frontline politicians, are now very quick to condemn and play what I call petty politics in order to try and appease, yes, the far-left activists who are now using the Palestinian flag, by the way, as a political symbol, not an actual...
Which should be banned. I believe the Palestinian flag should be banned.
I wouldn't have it flying, Gary. I said very clearly on to Adil Ray on another Rivals network, which shocked him. I'm sick to the back teeth of seeing that flag fly.
Yeah, I think it should have the same status as the Hamas flag or the Hezbollah flag. It is essentially a rallying call for Jew hatred. It is no more and no less than that. And I think that if we are serious, and I don't believe either the past government or the present government are really serious about fighting anti-Semitism, but a good starting point would be to ban that flag.
And when it comes to the Jewish community, the fear must be extraordinary right now, as well as obviously people feeling that they're just completely sort of not cared for, that they are the ones who have been pushed into a corner, almost ghettoised. God forbid I use that phrase, sorry for that. But, you know, that's essentially where we're now at. When it comes to the situation,
many Jews is, where do we go? Do we try to go to America? Do we go to Israel? Some are even talking about going to Eastern Europe, where the problem is far less acute than it is here. It's a question of where to go. That's the way the conversation is heading presently. There's despair. I think some people think that the only alternative might be if Nigel Farage and Reform UK become the next government, maybe they might do something about it. But there's no confidence in the Conservatives. There's no confidence in Labour.
I'm very sorry to hear that, Gary. That's Gary Monde, National Jewish Assembly. Thank you so much for joining us today with that dreadful story of GB Olympians, Paralympians turning their backs on Israeli national anthem. I will read out a British wheelchair basketball spokesperson said, British wheelchair basketball is aware of the incident during the Israeli national anthem at the Nations Cup. We are continuing discussions internally after conversations with Paralympics GB, IWBF and the Israeli Paralympic Committee. Well, they better make sure they damn well say sorry as far as I'm concerned. What do you think? Do you think it's a downright disgrace that these Paralympians from Great Britain, meaning to represent all of us, dragged politics into such an event and turned their backs on Israeli athletes simply to have some sort of faux outrage social media moment to try and get some cheap likes? I am. But what do you agree? 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk at the start of your message to 87222, and you can message and follow us on X at talkTV. After the break, should the UK be following Germany, as Germany is set to strip asylum seekers of legal support? What do you think? Let us know.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello everybody, welcome back here to the home of common sense. That is Talk. I'm Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the amazing Alex Phillips on Weekend Breakfast, and we are getting texts coming in. We've got Stuart here responding to that big Times exclusive interview, Sunday Times interview with Kemi Badenoch. I think Kemi reached the top because she's actually a Conservative and a nice, genuine and pleasant person, unlike the majority in the party these days, who are just a bunch of woke liberals. Well, there you have it, people sharing their views, and you can share your views too. You can voice note, you can message, and you can call on 03444 99 1000. That will get you through on WhatsApp and on the phone line. You can text the word talk at the start of your message to 87222, and you can follow our messages on X at talkTV to let us know what you are thinking. Please make sure you get those calls and those messages coming. I want to hear from you, the great British people. Kemi Badenoch, what do you think of her? Do you think she's the future of the Conservative Party? Do you give the Conservatives a second chance? Sir Keir Starmer announcing his big plan on tackling migration, illegal migration in particular, by looking and speeding up the appeal system to make sure that people get a decision made quicker, getting the backlog down. Do you think that will help smash the gangs and stop the boats? Angela Rayner in buying herself a luxury pad in Hove. Do you mind? Do you care? Do you think it's an issue, or do you think it's rank hypocrisy? And a whole host of other stories, such as Rachel Reeves making sure the UK is heading for an IMF-style bailout, as we last saw in 1976, according to the front of the Sunday Telegraph. Let us know what you think. But we go to our next story, which is related to migration. It's interestingly happening in Germany. It says here in the Telegraph, Germany to strip asylum seekers of legal support. Rejected asylum seekers in Germany could be stripped of their right to a lawyer to speed up deportations. Chancellor Merz will abolish a rule that automatically assigns a lawyer to asylum seekers awaiting deportation, even if they have lost their final appeal. Allies of Mr Merz told the Telegraph that the rule, introduced by a previous government, had mired German courts in red tape and was being used to prolong deportation cases. The slow pace of deportation proceedings is a tense political issue in Germany, where rejected asylum seekers committed a series of deadly terror attacks over the past year. Obviously, some would argue that CDU, which the Christian Democrat Party, which is led by Chancellor Merz, who's now the Chancellor of Germany, is very much in reacting to try and take on the Alternative for Deutschland, who scored heavily when it came to winning elected office in predominantly old East Germany. But we go now to Robert Bates. He's a research director for the Centre for Migration Control, and he joins me down the line. Hello, Robert.
Morning, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you so much for coming on. Now, Robert, what do you make of what Germany is doing here? Is this something that the UK should be following?
Of course it is. Of course it's something the UK should be looking to adopt as well. I think we're far too generous as well with our lawyers that we hand to asylum seekers. And of course, the Labour government has come in and increased by a third the amount that we are setting to one side to support people who have entered our country illegally and effectively allow them to frustrate our efforts to remove them. When it comes to Germany, I think their plans are really from the CDU, the result of what Germany has seen in the last year or so, with a real series of attacks from those that have actually failed asylum seekers. I think the whole of the West, and especially in Europe, has got itself tied for several years now, tied in far too many knots as a result of these self-imposed laws and this desire to make sure that due process is followed and everything is done above board. And unfortunately, what it has really resulted in is a proliferation of left-wing lawyers making a lot of money and really being able to actually frustrate the border sovereignty of nations. I think when it comes to the UK, we've seen on the front page of the Times today, Labour are announcing plans to do away with immigration tribunals and to effectively bring decision-making for appeals in-house into the Home Office. Now, I think when it comes to how Labour will manage this, I think what we actually probably will see is that many people get ushered into refugee status and all the benefits and housing that goes with that a lot more quickly. But I think longer term, if we see a centre-right government come in 2029, this is a very useful move, because really it is the left-wing lawyers masquerading as lawyers and as judges and are effectively activists that look to frustrate the borders. They're using this immigration tribunal system to keep our doors open and to keep effectively the chance of anyone that comes here, no matter how spurious their claim, with a very legitimate or very strong likelihood of having their asylum process and their asylum application approved. So I think what Labour have done is really open the door, and by doing away with the immigration tribunals, I think we could see progress made in the long term.
Is the concern, however, that if they speed up the process from the tribunals, which of course is welcome, that they actually, many of these people might just end up being granted the indefinite leave to remain anyhow? It would be essentially an amnesty in all but name. Or do you think and trust Labour will be robust enough to actually say no means no and you will now be deported from this country?
No, it will definitely be an amnesty with Labour, and that's a very uncomfortable thought. But effectively, it's an amnesty with the immigration tribunals as well. It just takes a lot longer, and we do have people staying in hotels for longer. So it will definitely end up with many more people that don't have a right to stay in Britain. I mean, arguably anyone that comes on a small boat doesn't have the right to stay in Britain, but it'll end up with many people being waved through. But by starting to loosen the vice-like grip that immigration tribunals do have over our borders, I think in the long run we are setting ourselves up in a good position, whether Labour know that or not, because if we bring in these decision-making processes in-house, we can then effectively, come 2029, have a much more strident approach to those people that have come here illegally and really sort of curtail some of that elongated process that does take place with judicial reviews and immigration appeals, which allows a large number of people to just simply disappear from the system as well. In the last few years, we've seen roughly 20,000 people just simply disappear and vanish into the grey economy as a result of how overly wrought our asylum system is, and I think actually making sure that elected politicians are in control of who is able to claim asylum is a very important step. So I don't think that's the intent of what Labour are doing here. I think they are literally just obsessed with closing down these hotels, and their way of doing that is to grant an amnesty. But I think once we have a bit of common sense back in the Home Office after the next general election, this will put us in a very good place.
Well, interesting that you say there that obviously 20,000 people who have come to this country illegally as economic migrants have gone missing in the system. Do we know predominantly the demographic and makeup in terms of age in particular? Are these predominantly males who are going missing? Are these people who claim to be children ultimately end up just being 18 to 24-year-olds looking to guarantee their right to stay here, as we know smuggling gangs encourage them to do, because of course we have no scientific age testing and they have no documentation when they present themselves to border force. Do we know anything of that? Sorry.
Yeah, it's about 90% male, and often people point out, well, a proportion of them will be children, but actually when you look really at the numbers, the number of people A, that are asylum seekers, and then B, are then disappearing, that are actually children, is a tiny number, and most of those children are actually 16 or 17, so borderline adulthood anyway. And of course, as you rightly point out, many people are simply just coming here and pretending to be children because then they get an extra layer of support and an extra layer of protection during their process. So it's a huge national security issue because, of course, we don't know anything about these men. We know that they're coming from nationalities that are overrepresented in crime statistics, and we really don't know what their intent is. We don't know what networks they're tapped into. We know that we've seen terrorists and spies coming across on the small boats as well. So this is something that really I don't think we should have ever allowed a situation where individuals are just free to roam around the country and just put up in hotels with carte blanche to do whatever they want. They should have been detained whilst pending their deportation.
It's interesting, what Germany's been doing. The German government statistics that came out showed that between January and July of 2025, they saw around 70,000 asylum applications applied for. We had 111,000 in the first year of the Labour government. But Germany's is a decrease of 50% compared to the same period of time last year, whereas in our Labour's first year is 14% up on the previous horrific Conservative year as well. I'm not going to forgive them. The reduction in numbers has been linked to tougher German government rhetoric on migration, passport checks at all land borders, and more broadly the passage of time, with far fewer people fleeing Ukraine, Afghanistan and Syria. So is there some hope coming down the track here for Sir Keir Starmer that if Germany's seeing such a decrease, fewer people are looking to flee, that will then filter through in time to the UK? Or is it just simply the case that people are travelling through Germany, travelling through France to get to those northern shores in places like Calais in order to cross here, because the UK still is a soft touch, as President Macron himself said we are?
It is primarily we are an outlier when it comes to Europe. We are crazily lenient when compared to other European countries on how we approach this. Of course, most of Europe is still stuck in this kind of post-Second World War malaise of how it approaches asylum issues, and not much has actually been done to adjust this system across the board for the 21st century in a time with greater mobility and greater connectivity. So the flows have really been something that many governments across Europe have been struggling to adapt to. I think the UK in particular, that we have a huge problem, not just with those that are coming across on small boats. We have a huge problem of people gaming the system and coming across on student visas, visitor visas, and then as soon as they step foot in the UK, they are suddenly finding themselves unable to return home for very spurious reasons as well. You know, circumstances have changed, or suddenly they've annoyed a gang and rubbed a gang up the wrong way, and would find themselves in danger if they return as well. So I think only about 50% of our asylum applications last year are actually people that came into the country through irregular, i.e. illegal methods, and a large proportion of them came across on visas. So we need to actually be looking at where those people that are coming across on visas and then claiming asylum are coming from, and start to begin to curtail some of the visas that we award to those countries as well. Because as you rightly point out, this is getting completely out of control. We've got a record number of applications last year. The system in 2019 was costing us about 600 million a year. It's now costing us roughly 5 billion a year. So this exploded out of all recognition. We're running out of dispersal accommodation, and that ultimately means that, you know, these contractors, these Sercos and Clear Springs and whatnot, are being effectively given a right by the government to go and start trying to buy up more homes. So this is a situation that is really putting the British population second, and human rights and really arcane and outdated ideas of how these processes should be handled above everything else.
Robert Bates there, thank you so much for joining us. That's Robert Bates, Centre for Migration Control, sharing us his views on that story that Germany is getting tougher. Do you want Germany copy and pasted in terms of what they're doing with not giving access to lawyers to frustrate the system? Call in 0344 499 1000. You can also WhatsApp us on that number too, and you can voice note us too. Or you can text to 87222 with the word talk at the start of your message. And then finally, you can also message and follow us on X at talkTV. I'll see you after the break.
Government has its way, and in particular Mad Ed Miliband, we will be literally hoist on the petard of this ludicrous net zero business. And the idea that you should boil your kettle when the wind's... I mean, help me, mother.
Well, also it demonstrates, doesn't it, Neil, the fragility of renewables for energy supply.
Well, I mean, the extraordinary thing is that we've now become so dependent upon these intermittent sources of energy.
Yeah.
The wind doesn't blow all the time. Obviously, the sun doesn't shine all the time.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, and I'm Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the amazing Alex Phillips here on Weekend Breakfast. I was delighted to just have another great guest on, and we've got more still to come. And our next guest is, in fact, Alex Wilson, Reform UK London Assembly member. Hello, Alex. How are you?
Morning, Jonathan. Great to be with you.
First of all, commiserations, Alex. I know you're running for the party board and unfortunately unsuccessful in the election. However, you've shown that you are an electoral force because you are a London Assembly member, and I know you'll be a very big voice for Reform UK when it comes to the future elections next May across all London boroughs, as well as the future mayoral election, where I'm sure you and I will both agree Sadiq Khan needs and has to go for the sake of everyone's sanity, particularly those of us who are funding a lot of stuff from outside of London because he can't be bothered to do his job properly. But sadly, Alex, Lawless London is on the streets of lawless Britain. I know that Reform UK have had a bit of flack when it comes to some of the stats that are being used here. I think some are trying to point at crime recorded or police recorded data. Others are saying that the survey that's done of how people feel is much more resulting from the ONS, which says that crime's halved over the last 15 years. I mean, you're an Assembly member, Alex. Does it feel like that to you? Does it feel like to the people you serve?
No, well, crime and policing in London is the biggest issue that people contacted me about on a regular basis. I mean, at the moment, we've got a huge issue going on with the Met wanting to close half of the police station front counters. That's a decision that they're claiming is an operational decision, but it clearly stems as a direct consequence of the political choices that the Mayor is making with the funding that he's allocating for his various budgets. He talks a good game. He says he's spending £1.1 billion on crime and policing this year. He's actually spending £1.4 billion on items relating to net zero and climate change. So if you want to ask what his real priorities are, you follow the money. It's a clear choice that he's making that is forcing these police stations to be closed, and that's at a time when confidence in the police is falling. People do not feel that London streets are safe. You ask any Londoner and they will tell you it feels much more dangerous than it has done for some considerable time. It's an issue we're talking about an awful lot. Obviously the Conservatives are a little bit as well, but Khan is in denial. He didn't even come to the meeting where we discussed those potential closures. He sent his deputy. Yeah, he was summoned, but he refused to come because he hides some accountability at every opportunity, and I don't think that's good enough.
Alex, you normally get the quite flippant answer, don't you, that you're just Reform UK, and he seems to think that he doesn't have to respond to you, even though you are, as I say, democratically elected by the people to be a voice of the citizens of London, many of whom will also be Reform voters. But Sadiq Khan seems to have a contempt for you, doesn't he? I see the great video clips where you ask what I think are pretty basic questions, which he seems to just never want to answer.
Yeah, his stock response seems to be that he'll never encourage anyone to work with Reform, which is very sad because, look, we were all elected at the same time last year, all 25 of us on the Assembly and obviously the Mayor himself. Our job is to hold him to account, ask those questions, put forward suggestions and hopefully make some progress. But if he refuses to listen to me or answer me properly, well, I think that says an awful lot more about him than it does about me.
Absolutely. Now, Alex, what I'm keen to get on is that despite what Mayor Khan tries to say, we've got a record 116,000 mobile phones stolen in London last year, an incredible 13 every hour, but only 169 suspects were charged by the police. Mobile phone theft, we obviously saw those ridiculous lines put down Oxford Street to encourage people, wasn't it, Alex, to be careful, to be out of reach, I think it was, because, of course, it should be the law-abiding citizen who has to go out their way to prevent themselves from being robbed, not the police actually doing the arresting of the criminal scumbags that are out there creating havoc on our streets. I mean, what do you say to this? Is this something that you're shocked by, or is this something that, again, as you say, it seems out of control and the Mayor's simply not prioritising?
Yeah, shocked but not surprised. I mean, when I think with Curry's put those signs up and those lines outside their shop on Oxford Street, mind the grab. Yeah, it's quite remarkable that a private company has to put those messages out to their customers and other shoppers on what is effectively the UK's high street, Oxford Street, a huge tourist attraction and also many Londoners use it on a regular basis as well. And really staggering that should have to be said. But it's symptomatic of a decline in lawful behaviour in London. We've seen it with our own eyes, and these phone stats that have just come out yesterday are absolutely staggering. It's even more than I thought it was. I thought it was a big enough problem with about 80,000 phones being stolen a year, but these latest figures now showing it's even 45% higher than that previous estimate. And as those figures also show, the actual number of criminals being apprehended and prosecuted is infinitesimally small in comparison. So it clearly isn't a priority for the Met, and that again stems from the leadership of the Met, the political leadership of the Met. Sadiq Khan, he's not making this a priority. He published an updated policing plan earlier this year, and mobile phones got barely a mention within that, and yet it's clearly a huge issue, not just for Londoners who live here, but for tourists and people who want to come and work and invest in our capital city. What message should it send to people who want to make London a success if you can't even get your phone out on the street without the risk of it being nicked? It's absolutely shocking.
Well, it's desperately concerning, and it was Crush Crime, the campaign group led by Dr. Lawrence Newport, who has uncovered this through Freedom of Information requests, who says, "We are in the midst of a phone theft epidemic and our government is failing to act. Our politicians need to wake up to reality. They need to stop this epidemic and push our justice system to catch, convict and imprison these career criminals. Half of all crime is committed by just 10% of offenders, meaning only a small number of career criminals are committing most phone thefts. Astonishingly, by the way, between 2017 to 2024, the total number of mobile phones reported stolen was almost 684,000, with an estimated value of 365 million. I mean, it just, again, makes a mockery of the system, doesn't it, Alex? That we've got people out there working hard, paying for this very expensive but, very decent, technology, that we're able to access the world, access our work, access fun and entertainment, be able to stay connected with one another, but now have to live in fear when walking the street of even holding the phone to their ear, checking the directions of where they're going, or simply getting their phone out to reply to someone on a message. I mean, how can we carry on like this? And again, the reason I poke at the Mayor, for listeners, is because he is the Police and Crime Commissioner of London. So whilst the Met Police, of course, have a responsibility, he's in charge of it with those powers that we've obviously then rolled out to other parts of the country too. And I mean, as Alex said, the money being spent is seeing, was it, Alex, how many is it, about 1,700 cops and police officers being cut in order to save money, as well as, like you say, only around 8 counters going to remain in terms of 24-hour access? Oh, sorry, Alex. Sorry, no worries. Sorry about that.
You got me a cough. No, yeah, absolutely right. So, as part of the savings that he says he's been forced to make this year, then 1,700 officers and staff will be cut, and these front counters. And I go back to the point I made originally. This is a consequence of the choice that he makes when he sets out his overall budget envelope each year. And I raised this when we had the meetings back in the early part of the year, highlighting, showing how he's spending a lot of money on policing and crime, but he's spending even more on climate and net zero. That shows what his real priority is. It's not about keeping Londoners safe. All he would need to do to plug that shortfall is to move some of that money across and put your money where your mouth is. You say you want Londoners to be safe, keep the streets safe, keep police stations open, keep officers on the beat, and then how you use those officers. I mean, the fact that you said and those figures confirm that a small number of criminals are responsible for a very, very large proportion of overall crime. So for all the talk of smashing the gangs in the Channel, let's try and smash some of the gangs here on London streets. Go after those phone thieves, and you'll sort an awful lot more out by targeting that, and you'll make huge progress. But he just doesn't want to listen, and that's the problem.
Another story, obviously, today, Alex, will be regarding what's going on in London this weekend, the Notting Hill Carnival. Obviously, a big celebration of Caribbean culture, has been rife with crime in previous years. In fact, 2 fatal stabbings taking place last year. We saw the Met Police put out a statement the day before the carnival started, say 100 arrests had been made, 41 knives, 11 guns taken out of hands of people that seek to cause mayhem and create chaos. But the real concern, particularly for the police, is around the crowd crush that could take place. Over 1 million people expected to descend upon Notting Hill this weekend. Shops and houses being boarded up, the streets narrow. Many people saying it's time to move the carnival into places like Hyde Park rather than continue on the streets. I mean, is Reform UK's position that it should be moved, or would you indeed actually just cancel Notting Hill due to some of the crime that's been related to it in the past?
No, I think we want to move it to a ticketed event in Hyde Park so it can be much more carefully managed. It's become a victim of its own success. It's a huge event every year. And yes, you're right, it's a huge celebration of Caribbean culture. And a lot of people have a lot of fun there, and that's great. But it has become a victim of its own success. It's outgrown the environment in which it operates, and we have these problems every year about crime, about crushing risks. And I think by moving it to Hyde Park as a ticketed event, you could solve all that in one go. I mean, I welcome those preemptive arrests at the end of last week. I think that's a very good thing. I will give the Met credit where it's absolutely due, and it certainly is on that front. But this event, it is a big event, and we have this question sort of every year, and we're kind of walking on eggshells and hoping that nothing serious happens. But at last year's event, there were 100 potential crush events that the police were aware of and deeply concerned about. It's why more funding was asked for additional security and safety measures this year, which of course it wasn't the organisers of the event that put that up, it was you and me, the taxpayer, that had to pay an extra £1 million. That's on top of the £11 million plus it costs to police the event every year. So it's a huge burden on London's taxpayers, as well as those crucial safety concerns. And I think you're absolutely right, let's make it a proper ticketed event in a secure, safe venue, then everyone can continue to have fun and do so in a way that is much safer, and those concerns are no longer apparent.
Well, rightly so. People would say, for example, when they want to go to Glastonbury or other events, people have to pay. Obviously, we see that secure zone set up to make sure that people who aren't paying for the ticket can't get in, ensuring that there's decent security to match the size of the crowd that's in attendance. I mean, it does feel that, rightly, the police are very concerned, as you say, with the crush incidents, and that would be far more damaging in some cases than someone wielding a knife, albeit obviously that would also be dreadful and disgusting. But crushing, as we've seen in the past with Hillsborough, is a real concern, right, Alex, especially with how narrow some of these streets are. Yes, you're absolutely right. It's the narrowness of the streets, the large numbers of people involved. That's why there's this potential for a crush incident. And if it happens, look, we all hope that nothing like that happens. Of course. But if it does happen, then it's too late. And we've talked about this year on year. We talk about this, and year on year nothing is done. So let's get ahead of the curve. Let's make sure from next year it's in a secure venue, and this won't happen. Mayor Khan has said in June of this year that the risk of crowd crush at the event, quote, made him frightened. I've seen, quote, images of some of the crowds at some parts of the day. Well, shame he didn't say that in his TikTok video. He was telling people to stay hydrated, not to wear their favourite shirt. Alex Wilson, thank you so much, Reform UK London Assembly member, for joining us on the show today. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've been texting in around all the stories that we've been saying. We've got a great one here saying about Kemi Badenoch. Thank you so much. We've got here Sharon, who's texted in from Staffordshire. I think Kemi's absolutely amazing. She's a breath of fresh air for the Tory party. Well, there you go. So love coming in. Quite a lot, actually, from Kemi Badenoch. One here related to what we said in Germany. Morning, Jonathan. Enjoying the show. Currently working away, paying my tax to help all these illegals in the country. The illegal immigrants shouldn't have had legal aid in the first place, let alone copying Germany by taking it away from them. Vote reform. No comments in the Tories. Absolutely hate Labour. That's Pete in Coventry. Another one here. Badenoch is in the wrong party. Nigel Farage is guaranteed to be the next PM after his latest speech, from John in Wallington. Another one here from Gary in Bolden. The UK will never stop lawyers from representing illegals. That's what it's all about. After all, our PM is a human rights lawyer. And from Dean in Dagenham. Morning, Jonathan. We can say what we want. We can say we want this and that. Nothing will happen. The complete crushing of Britain, as we know it, is the plan. For decades and decades, from school upwards, people have been brainwashed by lefty establishment and constant degrading of anything British. Many, it seems, in said establishment do seem to have a contempt for UK and British people. Well, you've been giving us your views. 0344 999 1000 87222 with the word talk at the start of your text, and message and follow us on X at talkTV. After the break, we've got more coming up regarding protests across the UK.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, Britain. It's great to be with you. I'm Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the amazing Alex Phillips here on the home of common sense. That is Talk, and I'm delighted to be hosting the Weekend Breakfast Show. And we've had a great array of guests and a load of stories to go through, and there's still more to come. So don't slow down. We've had the text coming in as well. Remember, you can call in 0344 499 1000. You can also WhatsApp us and voice note us via WhatsApp on that number too. You can text in the word Talk with the starting message to 87222, and you can follow and message us on X at talkTV. Just to read out some of the texts we've had through regarding that shocking story that Team GB wheelchair basketball turned their back on the Israeli athletes and Israeli national anthem at the games in some sort of what is expected to be protest regarding the war between Israel and Gaza. Morning, Jonathan. Great duo this morning with you and Duncan. Thank you so much. Just wanted to express my utter disgust at the sports team that turned their backs on the Israeli team. That's Natasha. Couldn't agree more. Steve is texting in from Wales. If the UK Paralympics basketball team cared that much, why didn't they boycott the match? A bunch of virtue signalling numpties. I also agree with that wholeheartedly. And I've also had a text as well. I was listing off some Conservative MPs that I think are very sound. And I've had a text here from Ali in Sidcup. Jonathan, you forgot to include Louis French as a righty in the Conservatives. Ali in Sidcup, thank you so much. And Louis is someone I know well, and he'll be delighted that you've texted in to add his name to that list. And then another one here. Regardless of what any government wants done with illegal immigrants, civil servants at the Home Office block a block will block them. They are on the undemocratic side of our system. Great show. Well, thank you so much, Stephen from Cambridge, for those kind words too. Well, let's get to another great guest. His name is Jack Hadfield. He is an independent journalist, and he joins me virtually down the line today. Hello, Jack. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. And well done for flying your flag. You've managed. Birmingham Council hasn't come around and ripped it down just yet, so that's good to see. Jack, you're obviously going to be out there covering more of the protests that are going on. Independent journalists like you have been very important in making sure that the coverage of these protests are demonstrating exactly what they are, which is the overwhelming majority. 99% of people going to them are law-abiding, peace-loving individuals who simply want to have their voices heard and say an end to the madness of housing migrants in hotels, some of whom, in lots of cases, have gone on to commit horrific crimes, whether that be shoplifting in parts of London, or whether that be, as you say, with the Bell Hotel in Epping, where 2 people have been charged with sexual offences, albeit they deny those charges and are due in court in the future. I mean, from your perspective, how have these protests been conducted? Are you shocked to still see the police allowing the Stand Up to Racism and Antifa Brigade balaclavaed up or masked up? Because, of course, nothing screams like being proud of what you think with by hiding who you are. Are you shocked that they're being allowed near? Because it does seem like there's almost, the police have got a wish on their hand here to almost allow confrontation to somehow come into play, albeit, as I say, it's those Stand Up to Racism and Antifa lot who are seeking that division to try and push their petty politics.
Yes, no, I couldn't agree more with that. I do think there is a thing where, for example, in Epping, where there was the big Stand Up to Racism protest there, where these people weren't bussed in the police vans, but they did come in the tube with me from central London all the way to Epping, and they were holding signs saying, oh, you know, Epping welcomes asylum seekers. Well, actually, you're not from this town, and everyone I speak to in this town says, actually, we don't want them here. But in that event, the counter-protesters were bundled together in a cage outside the Bell Hotel in Epping, you know, right next to the protesters from the town. And I thought to myself, well, why do they have a God-given right to counter-protest at exactly the same location? Couldn't they, for example, have had a protest somewhere in the middle of town or somewhere further afield there, so that there wouldn't have caused there wouldn't have even been an issue between the two groups? Certainly, the police like to have people facing off and shouting at each other, certainly in my opinion, because then there is this risk of further conflagration between the two groups, where things might get a little bit more interesting, you know, from a media perspective. But yes, I do think that these protests have been 99.999% peaceful that I've seen so far. I think it was just the first protest in Epping I went to just over a month ago where I saw a police officer get hit on the head by something thrown and bled slightly. But that was it. And I've been to, I don't know, I've literally lost count of how many protests I've been to over the last month. And there has been, again, minimal violence.
I think there's 27 protests, I think the Sun was reporting yesterday, across the United Kingdom over this weekend. I mean, are you going to any particular ones today at all to cover what's happening on the ground?
Yes, I'll be heading out. I've got a few in mind. I think I might be heading out to Epping again later this evening. There's others in Stevenage. I might head up to Manchester, actually. There's another one scheduled on there for that. So I'm just having a monitoring the situation on social media right now to see where I'd be best placed to do my reporting from.
And how do you find the interaction when it comes to being an independent journalist in terms of the police and then the public? Do you find that you are seen as a nuisance because you're willing to walk into the crowds, confront those both sides of the argument, ask them questions? Do the police see you as a pest, for example, Jack, or are you simply, as you say, just ignoring and carrying on? Because I think what you're doing is important to actually show, as you did with Epping and others, for example, that the majority are, you know, women in that case in Epping, you know, wearing their pink shirts, out there protesting for the safety of their daughters and grandchildren, because rightly they're concerned about the fact that people have been arrested and charged with serious sexual offences, as I say, for Ofcom reasons, albeit they deny those charges against them.
Yes, the police treat me relatively well, in fairness, although I do think there is a little bit of a privilege I have in that I just wear a suit to these protests, and so therefore, you know, I don't look like a live streamer. Yeah, and I don't stream. I put my clips up after they've been recorded. Whereas the streamers who are there, who provide, you know, just as much footage and important context as the independent journalists do. You know, Martin Gauci, for example, was somebody who was streaming in Epping and caught the busing and the police vans. AY Audits has been to a number of the other things as well. So, you know, these people are getting just as important footage as the independent journalists, because they seem to be, because the police consider them to be more part of the protests, then they usually get a little bit more you know, they don't give them as much leeway as somebody who looks like they're part of the press. In terms of dealing with the protesters and counter-protesters, though, I've not had a single bit of aggression from anyone who is protesting the asylum hotels. In fact, I've had multiple people ask to take selfies with me because they said, you know, that they appreciate me covering the situation fairly. You know, of course, I have a bias. I think everybody has a bias. I prefer to wear mine on my sleeve. But I say exactly what I see, and I don't, you know, twist it in any direction. Whereas when I try to speak to counter-protesters, stand-up for racism and Antifa, I've been flipped off, I've been sworn at, and been called a far-right fascist. One of their organising thugs came up to me at one point, called me a virgin incel, told me to go away, and I told him, hey, mate, you should try and get some more jokes. So we've heard the same. We've heard the same all before. And I actually moved across the other side of the road because the police said, "Oh, this might cause a public order incident." And I said, "Hang on, I'm the one trying to record and interview people here. I'm not the one being shouted at and harassed."
I mean, I just find it so depressing and so dull that these people continue to push the racism card every single time someone wants to have concerns. Actually, if they watch what the type of interviews you conduct with people on the ground explaining why they're there, they will explain to the Antifa thugs they're there because they genuinely care about the safety of their children and grandchildren and their community and how it's looking and feeling as after seeing masses of illegal migrants placed in hotels, destroying hospitality, retail and leisure in their local community, taking away bed spaces from women fleeing domestic violence to obviously veterans who are homeless on our streets. And I think people have a right to say, you know what, we're looking at what's happened in America, where Donald Trump, whether you agree with everything he's doing or not, has said it's time for America and Americans to be put first. Giorgia Meloni in Italy, elected because she says she's putting Italy and Italians first. Viktor Orban in Hungary, putting Hungary and Hungarians first. And maybe people might want to understand that reform's on the rise, because reform is saying that Britain, of course, has a responsibility on the world stage. We have a proud history of that. But we are in extraordinarily challenging times, whether that be with migration, whether that be with economy, whether that be with law and order, mostly because of failures in policy from the Conservatives and now Labour government. And it's time for Britain to put itself first and to leave global affairs to other people if it's not impacting us in our own backyards. And I just think that is the simplest way for people to understand why these protests are happening. I mean, what are the key messages you get from people? What's the, probably, if you could summarise what the key reasons are that people are protesting on the streets, what would those messages be?
Yeah, I think number one would be protecting women and girls from being potentially sexually assaulted, raped, murdered, etc. Obviously, that's what this alleged case where the Ethiopian migrant has now been charged with sexual assault in Epping. That is what sparked off these rounds of protests. And we've seen other cases where two Afghani asylum seekers have been charged in Nuneaton with the rape of a 12-year-old girl. In Canary Wharf at the Britannia Hotel, where I've been down pretty often, there was, again, a resident there who allegedly entered somebody's house and had to be chased out because their blind and bedbound aunt was there. And who knows what would have happened if he hadn't been removed from the house and chased out and detained by the locals. So protecting women and girls is number one, and I think number two is a lot of these people have said, well, why are we spending money on these people who've come from overseas, who have come from safe countries? We're spending billions on them when we need to fund the NHS. We need to fund help disabled people who can't go into work. We need to allow people to work for the first thing and not have their tax completely stripped from them to go to people who shouldn't be here in the first place. So a lot of these people, I think, would have been people who've never turned out to protest before, probably standardly economically left, a lot of them. There seems to be a lot of working class people who've turned out for this, probably who would have voted Labour in the past, but now never, ever, ever will again because of their policies.
That's very interesting, Jack. I was going to ask you, I don't know if you ever get a chance to get into the politics on the ground. Maybe some people just don't want to talk about it, understandably so. But I'm interested. So Keir Starmer has said he's got over 30,000 people deported out of this country, a huge increase on the year before under the last Conservative government, albeit obviously only 7,000 out of the 35,000 actually enforced, the rest voluntary. We've got the Sunday Times splash today that says Sir Keir Starmer's going to speed up asylum processing, particularly when it comes to appeals and tribunal courts, to make sure that decisions are made and upheld. We've obviously also got the fact that they've said repeatedly they want to end migrant hotels by 2029 and the use of them, and that they've got their deal with France to return people who've crossed the Channel illegally. They've got a deal with Germany to take on the smuggling gangs and to make sure they intercept in the inflatable dinghies that are being used to bring people across the English Channel. Is Keir Starmer and his Labour Party getting any thanks or recognition for the work they're doing, or does no one buy it?
No, you're right. Nobody buys it at all, especially with the Labour, for example, who obviously reopened the Bell Hotel in Epping after it was closed under, I believe, Robert Jenrick as immigration minister, and moved away from families towards single men only. So no, nobody gives Labour any credit here, but also I don't think anybody gives the Conservatives any credit, because obviously this is a Blairite policy of open door mass migration that started. The Conservatives increased it with the Boris wave, and now Labour are just again making it even worse. I think, of course, Keir Starmer maybe say, "Oh, I'm deporting 30,000 people." Well, obviously these are only specifically illegal immigrants as well, whereas 4% of all migration into this country is illegal and 96% is legal. However, people think that it's around 50-50. But when you ask them what's the overall total migration, they think it's around 70,000, which is obviously off by a factor of 10. So they think it's still too high. And that's Labour voters, Reform voters, Tory voters, Lib Dem voters, even Green voters are against asylum hotels still as an overall majority. So every voting demographic that you can think of thinks illegal immigration is out of control, immigration overall is too high, and they're completely underestimating the scale of the problem. So if Keir Starmer deports 30,000 people, hundreds of thousands more, millions are going to come over. And if they come here illegally in a small boat, or, for example, if they're then shipped in legally by the government under, say, the Afghan resettlement scheme, well, it's been Afghan nationals who are 22 times more likely to be convicted for sexual assault than British nationals in this country. So it doesn't matter how they come here. People don't want any of them here to begin with.
Thank you so much, Jack Hadfield, independent journalist, who will be on some of those migrant protests this weekend taking place across the country. We now go a big sidestep to a whole different conversation. We have 90 minutes in 90 seconds when it comes to the Sun and the sport.
90 minutes in 90 seconds from the Sun.
Well, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Mr. Sean Curtis. He's the head of sport for the Sun, and what a load of stories on the back page of the Sun. A very happy-looking Victor Gyökeres there after getting 2 goals on his debut at home in front of a very happy crowd. A 5-0 thumping by Arsenal of Leeds. I mean, Sean, a happy day for everyone at the Emirates?
Well, not everyone, because although they won 5-0, they have a lot of injury concerns. I mean, players like Saka, who could be out for a long time, Martin Odegaard limped off, and that's a big worry for Arsenal, who have really targeted winning the title this season. You've got a debut for youngster Max Downman on the upside, won a penalty, played really well, coming on as
15 years old. I mean,
15
incredible.
Years old, tremendous. It's not the youngest player ever to play for Arsenal, but he looked the part. He really did look the part. And as you say, Gyökeres scoring 2 was a big thing for him. Didn't look great last week in his first game, but battering ram performance, good display. So signs are good, and Eberechi Eze, of course, is signed from Crystal Palace. He came on looking very cool as he waved to the crowd at the start, and he's going to be important to them now, especially with these injuries. At first we were thinking, well, where's he going to play? How do you fit him into this Arsenal team now? He could be in 3 different positions, frankly.
Where do you think he will be best served? I mean, obviously, you've got Madueke, who's come in as well for 55 million, and he started the game yesterday.
Yeah, I think he'll probably play on the left ultimately, but he may play central, given their injury problems. Doubt he'd go on the right for Saka, but hey, you never know. There's a few things to juggle with for Arsenal.
And have we had any news in terms of what the injury is for Saka specifically at this moment?
No, just that it looks like it could be a long job, which is terrible for him because he's had some bad injury problems. Saka starting to look back to his best towards the end of last season.
I mean, his goal yesterday was superb, right?
Yeah,
from that tight
absolutely.
angle.
I mean, he's a good player, great player for England as well, and club and country need him.
Yeah, indeed.
Very good for North London yesterday because Spurs went and won at Manchester City.
Incredible.
Which I don't think we were really expecting, because for all Man City had a relatively bad season last year, they finished really well, and they'd started this season well, winning 4-0 at Wolves last week, and they go and win and they go and lose 2-0 to Spurs, who put in a heck of a performance, and under Thomas Frank are looking a lot more secure at the back, which is most unusual for Tottenham, really. So to win 2-0 at City, is a bit of a statement from them.
I was interested because, like you, with Man City last week, I thought, oh, here's the Man City I remember from about 2-3 years ago. A lot more energy, a lot more, I thought, intent on the press. And then I saw the game yesterday, and it just looked a bit flat, a bit disjointed. You know, Haaland maybe learning to connect with Shaqiri and a few of the other new players in there. It just didn't feel the it didn't feel the same performance as you saw, as you say, the week before. Whereas in Tottenham, like you say, I'm shocked with how quickly Thomas Frank's been able to insert that stamp on the team without having tons of signings at his disposal.
Yeah, but he's playing City at their own game. The high press, getting into them, not letting them have any time on the ball, but doing it in a better way that they did under Postecoglou. Under Postecoglou, they tried to press from the front, but left big gaps in midfield. This way, all the team is moving up together, and they're really getting on top of the opposition. And City didn't know what to do. And James Trafford, young keeper,
bad debut,
coming in. Well, it was his second game.
Oh, second debut. Sorry,
but he struggled with that, and he's not so good with his feet as Ederson. And Pep wants the goalkeeper to be able to play with his feet, and Trafford looks like he's going to struggle with that.
Do we know? Are we expecting Donnarumma in, Ederson out, or are we still very unsure what's happening in that?
To be honest, I don't know why City would be interested in Donnarumma. He doesn't play very well with his feet. He's not that great in the air. People say he's a great goalkeeper, and yes, he's played for Italy a lot, and he's obviously played for the European champions. But there's a reason he's leaving PSG. They don't think he's good enough in his all-round game. So it doesn't make sense to me that if they can, if I was City, I'd keep Ederson. I certainly would. Games going on today. Palace v Forest is going to be a bit of a humdinger. Ordinarily, you'd look at that fixture and think Palace v Forest, big deal, but there is so much enmity now between the two clubs because, of course, Palace got demoted from the Europa League. Forest got promoted because of Palace's multi-club ownership problems. Nuno at Forest is having arguments with the owner. Looks like he could be leaving the club, possibly.
Yeah, it's crazy. Fallout that we're seeing in Nottingham Forest.
Absolutely. We talked this morning in The Sun about the possibility of Brendan Rodgers coming in at Forest. Now, Rodgers is saying up at Celtic that he's no intention of leaving, but I've heard that before from Brendan Rodgers, and then he leaves. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens there. Man United under quite a bit of pressure, having lost their first game. So they're at Fulham today. And Everton play in their new stadium for the first time in the Premier League, so that'll be a big day for us.
Well, as a Fulham fan, I'm nervous because we've not signed anybody to date.
No, Silva was getting a bit annoyed about that.
I think Silva's done an incredible job with what I think is actually a relegation sort of battling team, and he's managed to keep us in middle tier, top half of the table.
Done a good job.
I think we're lucky to have kept him as our gaffer, and the team is getting old. There's a lot of old. Tom Kenny, love him to death, but 35 years old now. Yeah. Other players there in the team too, and I'm looking at it going, I think we're in trouble. And I think Man United, if they can bring that same energy, and again, for the first time I saw the 3-4-3 looking like I understood how it was meant to work. I think if they can repeat that performance from last week, I think Fulham are in for trouble today. That's my personal view.
Yeah, I think you could be right, because Man United weren't as bad as people think last week, were they? They put up a good performance and were a bit unlucky to lose.
A step in the right direction. Well, thank you. That's Sean Curtis, the head of sport for The Sun. That was 90 minutes in 90 seconds with The Sun.
90 minutes in 90 seconds from The Sun.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. We'll be going to a quick break before we get to our next head-to-head. We'll see you shortly.
That the state describe Ruda Bacana as a boy with needs. That is astonishing and gives you such a clear insight into the woke, liberal hand-wringing, pathetic and frankly dangerous thinking that pervades not only senior people in the prison system, but the sentencing council, the parole board, and many other aspects of public life today.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is the home of common sense. This is Talk. I'm Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the amazing Alex Phillips for Weekend Breakfast, and I'm delighted to be joined now in the studio for our head-to-head. Mr. Mike Indian, political commentator, and Mr. Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, Conservative councillor and commentator. Hello, gents. How are you doing?
Morning.
I'm loving the flat cap, by the way. Big fan of a flat cap.
Very on brand, I think.
No, good. Well, I think it is. It's very stylish.
Yeah, well, this is good. A lot of the listeners don't like the flat cap, but I've got your endorsement.
No, I'm pro the flat cap. I'm pro the flat cap. Well, look, first story is we had the big exclusive in the Times yesterday. Reform UK, some would say, finally releasing their long overdue plan for mass deportations. I think we're expecting the actual finer detail on Tuesday. I think we'll see the actual draft of a bill that would come in. But for listeners who weren't tuned in yesterday or haven't heard the story, I'll very quickly try and summarise it. Number one, if you arrive here illegally, you'll be immediately arrested. You'll then be detained in a detention centre that will be predominantly old military bases that will be used to be secured using Nightingale-style prefab build-up. There'll be enough spaces for 24,000 people. Those people will then be deported to countries like Afghanistan and Eritrea if they're from there, because Nigel Farage is willing to do deals with those countries. Otherwise, he will reheat the old Rwanda plan and have other safe third countries. And if that doesn't work, the Ascension Islands are due to host illegal migrants in the coming days under a Reform UK government. He will leave the ECHR, scrap the Human Rights Act, derogate from the UN Convention for Refugees and the Human Torture UN Guarantee 2. He will also introduce a British Bill of Rights and says that he will be able to offer people to leave for £2,500. If they voluntarily sign up on an app to deport themselves, they'll get £2,500 plus the flights paid for, very much in that Donald Trump style that we've seen there. And he reckons they'll do this all for the cost of £10 billion over 4 years, with an estimated $7 billion in saving from ending the use of hotels. A lot in there, very eye-catching, not unexpected. I think Reform will go further than anyone else. But Mike, is the risk here Reform UK selling expectations well beyond people's wildest dreams and people being very sceptical that he'll be able to do even half of this?
I mean, you're right to be sceptical because there are considerable political, legal, social barriers to doing this, but I think it's all to do with how they sell it in terms of delivery, Jonathan. I think it's about, if they say realistically by the end of the next Parliament, if there's a Reform government, it also will depend, of course, if there is a Reform majority as well, or if there is a potential to do deals with other parties as well. And it's interesting that we are already talking about Nigel Farage as a Prime Minister in waiting only just over a year after the last general election as well. So a lot of this, I think, is going to make people on the left very uncomfortable, but when you have roughly 10% of migration figures coming from asylum seekers, half of those entering the country illegally, it's a very focused, targeted plan. I think will have a lot of weight with the target audience that Farage is going after.
And what's going to be interesting, of course, is there's going to be a lot of pressure, I think, also to say, what are you doing with those people who have come here legally and then overstayed their visa, which is the largest proportion of people who are in the country illegally. It's an interesting week for Labour. We've had Graham Stringer, albeit a well-known Brexiteer, come out and say we should leave the ECHR, and then we've got a Labour MP in Mansfield saying we should be doing a Rwanda-style plan. I mean, it's just a bit farcical, isn't it?
Well, this highlights the breadth of the PLP these days as well. Labour's always had those individuals within it that want to take a harder line on immigration than, say, perhaps Starmer and most members of the Cabinet who are from, say, from London seats might be comfortable with. But what this does reflect as well is that they're recognising that immigration is going to be a consistent issue through the next Parliament. Labour's pledge to end the use of asylum measures already looks vastly out of date. They're now looking at streamlining the asylum procedure as well. Without bold action on the subject of immigration, without bringing down the net migration figures overall, without addressing this source of illegal migration too, but also, as you say, dealing with being able to ban, those 32,000 people in hotels, how many of them are here illegally and illegally, they're not going to be able to make any headway, I think, before the next election.
Now, Matthew, Conservative Party have quickly came out. Chris Phillips said that this is just a reheating of many of the Conservatives' ideas.
Yeah.
The Conservatives have their own deportation bill, where they say that every illegal migrant who comes here will be deported. I found it a bit rich for Chris Phillips to question Nigel Farage's plan when it's essentially the same plan as to deport everyone. In fact, I would say there's a little bit more meat on the bone, because Chris Phillips only saying about carving out elements of the Human Rights Act. Well, I can tell you now, having been in Parliament, carving things out ends up in just more judicial reviews and condemnations. And I also find it a bit rich, Matthew, as a former Conservative MP, because 80% of the spineless buggers in Parliament that I had to work with voted against these very measures when we put them down as amendments to the Safety of Rwanda Act, as it became, under Rishi Sunak. So isn't it just the reality that Nigel Farage is not just eating your breakfast and your lunch, he's now having dinner too, albeit Kemi would say she's not so bothered about lunch.
Yeah, no sandwiches in a Kemi cabinet. I think from my point of view, to quote McDonald's, I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving what Nigel Farage is putting out for this deportations bill, because it is everything...
Put him on defection watch, everyone. Put him on defection watch.
No, it's the point of, it's common sense. It's everything that people are wanting. It's everyone who's proud of this country cares about. If you come here illegally, you can't stay. You should be arrested, not put onto a bus and sent off to a lovely, nice hotel. Use those barracks, use those military bases to put people, frankly, in tents and get them out of this country. I mean, Germany has just deported 81 Afghan refugees, 81 Afghan nationals back to Afghanistan. If Germany can do it, we can do it. So it's the fact of, as the Conservative Party, when the Conservatives were in government, we saw how long it took to get the Rwanda deal to a point of fruition where a plane was on the taxiway. And then even then, we couldn't get it through. I love the fact that Reform are aiming for the sky. I don't mind if they get halfway, because that's the thing. It's further than we're going to get under anyone else. And I find it really a shame that the first thing the Conservatives do coming out, as a Conservative councillor, the first thing the Conservative Party comes out and goes and says, are we just rehashing what we've done before? It's like, well, sorry, Reform looks like they're going to be the next government. We are miles away from anything. I mean, Kemi's announced that we're going to announce at party conference a plan to leave the ECHR. Well, that's great. It's taken you a year and a bit to decide that. I just find it infuriating. And as a Conservative on the local level, everything that I can do on a local level as a Conservative councillor completely wiped away by the national politics. Do you know what? For once, I'm really happy that another party other than the Conservatives is now taking the lead on this.
I can't wait to see Alicia Kearns, who's a shadow minister in the Home Office, who I can tell you now is not a fan of leaving the ECHR, suddenly come out and say we should leave the ECHR. I am going to get my popcorn out and watch that one. If I get the chance to interview her, I can't wait, because I'll certainly be sharing stories from behind the scenes. And I think it's interesting, Matthew, you say that. My frustration was, surely, and I said it to Katie Lamb yesterday, and I must say, she was very coy in how she answered the question about working with Reform and what she thought of Reform's plan. She said, Labour don't get it, Reform do get it, just like the Conservatives get it.
Their finger on the
pulse.
pulse.
I was saying also, isn't this a chance for Conservative Reform to actually, not like you say nitpick, but actually come together? If you unite the right on a plan on this issue, because I think the likelihood is Labour will be largest party or Reform will be largest party, and it's either Lib-Lab coalition or a Reform Conservative coalition that's going to likely form the next election, just because of the sheer mathematical numbers. Maybe I'll be proven wrong and I'll have to eat a hat, metaphorically, not
maybe that
physically.
Hat, who knows?
Maybe that hat there.
Made of marzipan, are
you frustrated that we're just... There's no attempt to even try and work together on issues like this?
So at the general election last year, I ran the campaign for Bob Blackman, Conservative MP for Harrow East.
Well, the safest seat now in the country.
Now the safest seat in the country for the Conservatives, increased our majority, only Conservatives have over 50% of the vote. The point is that we ran that on the back of having a track record, actual deliverable things that we can do. I'm not seeing that elsewhere. The Conservative Party is burying its head in the sand, and I've been saying for a year now, we need to stop pretending like Reform aren't an issue. They are the biggest threat to the survival of the Conservative Party ever. And I ran campaigns this year in the local elections. I ran campaigns that bucked the trend of the only victory against Reform. Every other seat, gone, wiped to Reform. Not even a chance of anyone else getting in. It is happening, and people in this party need to wake up to it. But instead, all we see is reshuffling the deck chairs, People being put into promotions and put into roles where they've got no track record of it. And I, on the ground, am so furious and fed up because I've got loads of colleagues who are doing brilliant things, really, really great things. You knock on the door and they say, oh, I like you, but I cannot stand that party. I cannot vote for that party. I'm up for election next year. I have the colleagues across London and England who are up for election next year. And we're having to say to people, don't vote because we're Conservatives, vote because of me. That's the state this party's got to.
Mike, obviously Labour have come out today to Keir Starmer on the Times with a big punchy story here, which is that they're going to curb judges' powers in asylum cases. Quite a big thing for a human rights lawyer to say he's going to curb the ability of judges. Instead, scrap it for a panel essentially of experts who will instead determine whether to hold up the Home Office decision. And they think that will, one, speed up time for processing, particularly appeals, which, by the way, I totally agree with. Labour are bang on the money. The appeals process is a joke. There's 51,000 in the backlog, as we know today. The problem, though, I think Labour's got is that around 60% of people are approved asylum on their first attempt, and then around 48% are approved when it comes to their appeal. So it's going to be around 70 to 80% of people being approved. That's going to feel like an amnesty in all but name. And I just worry also that this is an important part of the puzzle, but it's not actually going to smash the gangs.
No. And Starmer has to still put the meat on the bones of that phrase. He had to deal with France, which has been, although logistically it makes sense, is still looking... to most people, it looks like a one-in, one-out policy for a nightclub. Streamlining the appeals process is part of the issue. We have a backlog, as you say, where nearly over a quarter of cases have been waiting more than a year. And for those people as well that came here through legal routes and are sitting around in some hotel somewhere, in Epping or not anymore, but waiting for this, it's for their benefit as well. So cutting the backlog will help. I think we also need to be, as I've said this many times before, we also need to be looking at a good route and branches for how we plan immigration into this country as well. Where do we want people coming in? Where do we need people coming in? This is where the Migration Advisory Committee should be far more active in saying, not just in terms of sectors, but also geographies as well. But the other side of this is, as you say, tackling the high-profile amounts of illegal migration. The images of small boats coming over. And, it's interesting that Matthew said Reform are aiming for the skies. They need to get all the way there. Until there are these flights taking off, until that first flight happens, that is a powerful PR disincentive. But if it doesn't happen, for a lot of people, they'll just think it's empty rhetoric, as most people thought the Conservatives' Rwanda policy was.
And that's going to be the trouble for whomever is the next government. You aim for something, actually being able to deliver it. People are fed up of broken promises. It is all about delivery. And I think right now, people are fed up by the Conservative Party. My God, fed up by the Labour government. People are willing to take a risk and roll it on.
I really do think for reform, they're going to have to outline, as you rightly say, getting it through Parliament. So you're going to be sitting all day, all night. By the way, we should be doing that. I used to be frustrated when we didn't do that. Take away this family-friendly hours nonsense. But you're going to require that. You're going to have to overcome the House of Lords hurdle. Then you're going to have all the inevitable legal challenges all the way up to the Supreme Court in this country. The civil service, who is certainly not going to help you trying to implement it. I think we'll see general strike called if there's a reform government because of virtue signalling trade union bosses. So I think it will be quite an extraordinary thing. And like you say, Nigel Farage has got to outline in these scenarios, what do you do? Because, as you say, I don't think he's going to be given... He can't spend years bogged down by this. It's going to have to happen within months.
Otherwise we're going to end up in a situation where it's Trump's first term, where anything he wants to do is overturned by the courts. Anything he wants to do is pushed back against. Then he loses an election and comes back going, well, I told you I was right, wasn't I? Well, that is almost a plan that we could end up seeing here. Reform government comes in, cannot get anything done because of the establishment, loses... or comes back with a massive stonking majority and says, we told you it was the establishment's fault, we're going to rip it up. That is a playbook I can see happening over the next 10 years.
The flip side is that Farage has to spend the next 4 years defending this policy as well. So this is essentially the first plank of what a reform manifesto will be, which would cushion it against the Lords through the Salisbury Convention if it's explicitly spelled out. Reform's plans last year it weren't a manifesto, it was a contract. It's a sort of headline series of pledges. I can tell you their health policy was largely a joke, using the independent sector to the degree they wanted to do. Didn't make any degree of sense. I can say that from my experience of working with Bupa. The issue then becomes, once Farage has fixed a position, he then has to keep it. And of course, we have 4 years worth of events still. The polls can still move as well. We may not have the same Conservative leader. We don't know if we'll have the same Labour leader even in the same 4 years' time. Labour do have that. The only certainty is we'll have a Labour government defending its record at the next election. Whoever the Prime Minister is at that point in time is open for debate at the moment, especially if figures on the economy keep changing as well. But for Farage, this is fixing his colours to the mast on a very complicated issue, which is something he hasn't had to do before when he's been on the outside as a populist for always championing for an issue, but now he's actually having to come up with policy. It's going to be a fascinating shift in how they communicate.
Ladies and gentlemen, after the break, we will still be joined by my friends Matthew and Mike in the studio as we go through the next story, which is going to be, are we heading for an IMF bailout as Rachel Reeves crashed the economy? We'll see you after the break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, everybody. Jonathan Gullis here on Talk for the great Alex Phillips on Weekend Breakfast. We've still got Mike Indian, political commentator, and Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, Conservative councillor and commentator, joining me in the studio for today's head-to-head. We go to the splash on the front of the Sunday Telegraph, which suggests that we're heading for a 1970s-style IMF bailout, the last one happening in 1976. The piece refers to the fact that we have a £50 billion black hole, according to the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, for Rachel Reeves to fill. The actual IFS itself says it estimates at their annual review there's a £20 billion shortfall to fill. They suggest charging people on high incomes to use the NHS and axing the pension triple lock, albeit I think actually that last one's going to be something that all parties are going to have a serious debate about if they want credibility on the economy. However, the government will say borrowing has actually come down. The latest figures show that they borrowed £1.1 billion less than projected by the OBR, Office of Budget Responsibility. However, the ONS has said that between April and July 2025, total $60 billion in government borrowing. Unemployment's up to 4.7%, inflation up to 3.8%. And to add insult to injury, the Office for Value for Money, announced by Rachel Reeves at last year's budget, is due to close within a year. I think if ever you wanted a metaphor for this Labour government, there it is. It's going to cost the taxpayer $1.6 million. However, Treasury spokespeople claim it's delivered $14 billion of efficiency savings per year. I'm going to call absolute BS on that until someone shows me otherwise. But hey, Mike, you're a lot of crash the economy, haven't they? You've killed the country.
I mean, to be talking about, a year in after, less than, a year and a half in office, to be talking about, even thinking about going for an IMF bailout is extraordinary. I'm just remembering how Healey had to sell the bailout in 1976. He had to speak from a time-limited thing at Labour conference in Blackpool. Reeves will. He hasn't got Healey's gift for communication in this.
No.
The issue is still that there is a widespread consensus that there is a shortfall in government spending. They say 20 to 50 billion. For context, Reeves raised 50 billion in taxes last year, mostly through the 25 billion from the national insurance increase. We've seen the slowing effect, the cooling effect that's had on the jobs market alongside other things as well. Growth is held up at anemic levels, but still it's better than projections.
I was about to say, it's still the fastest growing, Matthew. I'm going to quickly point this at you. Still the fastest growing economy in the G7. If the first half of the year is replicated, it will be 2% growth. And Labour did bank on 2 to 2.5% growth per annum in order to meet their figures. So you've got to give some credit there. They've managed to carry on the Conservative legacy.
Well, let's all celebrate the 2% growth. I mean, come on, we need to be going even more.
For,
the fact is that Rachel from Accounts must be the only Chancellor who's come come into government, claimed and made up that there was a £22 billion black hole, a year later made it a £50 billion black hole, and still can't point the finger at herself. I'm sorry, but this is a government that said they're going for growth. Then, as you said, we might end up with 2% by the end of the year. We've seen them U-turn on every single financial decision they've nearly ever made because Captain Flip-Flop can't make his own mind up. I'm absolutely fed up. But don't worry, it's us, the taxpayers, are going to have to bail this out. It's us, the taxpayers, are going to have to pay more. She raised taxes to record levels at the last autumn budget. She'll do it again this year. It was just ridiculous. This Labour government got into government saying they had a plan. They had plans. They were ready to go. They knew that they were going to be in government. They had years where the poll said it's going to be a Labour government. This has been an absolute disaster. And I'm sorry, but if we end up with a bailout, Rachel has to go.
But Matt, wouldn't it be fair to say, to push back on you, they did come in, they said that they uncovered a £22 billion black hole.
Which no one can verify.
Left by the last Conservative government. And the fact the Conservative government left the tax burden at the record highest level, despite relentlessly saying we are a low tax party.
Correct, but the last Conservative government had to pay for COVID, had to get the government through the Ukraine crisis, and had to keep the country going. If the Conservative government had said during COVID, right, OK, if you lose your job, sorry, goodbye, then I think we'd be having revolt on the streets.
But as challenge to you, isn't Labour dealing with the fallout from the pandemic in terms of when we shut the economy? Aren't they still falling out from the war in Ukraine?
We'll be dealing with the impact of these for years and years and years to come. But the fact of the matter is, you can't come into government and say, right, everything's going to be nice and better now. You know, make speeches in the Rose Garden like Keir Starmer saying, well, it's going to be difficult, but life is going to be better. I am sorry, but they've had over a year now, right? They have a stonking majority, a landslide majority. They could change politics tomorrow if they wanted to. It's a bank holiday tomorrow, but if the Labour government says, we're recalling Parliament, we're sitting here for 24 hours, we are going to push through all of these bills, they could do it. I'm sorry, but there is no sense of, oh, poor Rachel from accounts, poor no-brainer Rayner, poor two-tier Keir. They could change politics tomorrow forever if they wanted to. I have no sympathy at all.
Mike?
I mean, the issue, the ticking time bomb of the UK economy is not our anemic growth rate. It's not the amount of debt we hold. It's the cost of servicing debt. It's the fact that since the last few years, the long-term cost of government borrowing has been ticking slowly upward. And it's happening for every major advanced economy. Money markets no longer want to see any advanced Western economy, the US, Japan, the UK, borrowing when their growth rates are so low, because you cannot inflate away that debt. We have one of the highest debt interest repayments. UK 30-year gilt rates, the longest term gilt rate the Treasury sells, is now at 5.59%. And due to the debt stock the UK holds, due to the amount of QE that we did during the financial crisis, a lot of that debt is maturing and then moving to rapidly higher interest rates. We are spending £1 in every 12. This is a problem for both Conservative and Labour governments as well now. So borrowing is no longer an option now. It's either swinging spending cuts or tax increases to keep public services largely on the same status quo where they are. That's a very unsatisfactory thing for Labour. And as for this, people talking about a wealth tax as well, that's all very well and good in principle for the left to talk about that, that they think about the transfer of wealth. In actual fact, the biggest mistake this government made was to bind its hands on saying we won't raise income tax, VAT or national insurance, because those are the three big levies available to the Chancellor. And in that sense, Reeves has backed herself into a corner. So she'll be scrabbling around, closing inheritance tax loopholes in the budget. She will raise taxes again, but this time round, I'm not so sure where the obvious revenue raiser
They will
well, very quickly, sorry, Matt, just to interject, because we've got Tristan in Bedford who sent us a voice note saying Keir and Reeves don't take accountability. Before we go to the break, I thought we'd just hear from the listeners.
Obviously, there are so many problems, but the problem is Rachel Reeves and two-tier Keir, like Keir, don't take any accountability. They seem bereft of any accountability at all. And the thing is, the longer they act this way, the more and more people are just going to get more and more annoyed. People are already disillusioned. People are already fed up. I could swear, but I'm not going to. And the thing is, there's no accountability. And industries are going down because of policies like net zero and different things like that. And there's no common sense or logic. Everything just seems to be governed against ideology. And it just makes no sense. It's just absolutely insane. I'm just paying taxes for immigrants, it seems. Great show.
Well, thank you very much there to Tristan in Bedford for that amazing voice note. We've got more lined up, but we've got the head-to-head to continue after the break. We'll see you soon.
describe Rudabakana as a boy with needs. That is astonishing and gives you such a clear insight into the woke, liberal, hand-wringing, pathetic and frankly dangerous thinking that pervades not only senior people in the prison system, but the sentencing council, the parole board, and many other aspects of public life today.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hey up, Jonathan Gullis here, sitting in for Alex Phillips, the amazing Alex Phillips, that is, on the Weekend Breakfast Show. We go straight back to the head-to-head with Mike Indian and Matthew Goodwin-Freeman joining me in the studio to go to another big exclusive story, actually, was again on the Sunday Times, which was Badenoch. There are racists who say I reached the top only because I'm black. Mike, do you think that when she did this Sunday Times magazine interview, which is a big opportunity, was that the headline do you think she was expecting or aiming for?
Probably not. And again, we talked earlier about why the Conservative Party under Kemi's leadership cannot be seen to give too much ground to reform, because essentially it's the leader of the official opposition acknowledging that for the last year, or the 9 months or so of her leadership, her presence there has been largely irrelevant. And, I have some degree of sympathy here from having seen, the Labour Party have irrelevance under Jeremy Corbyn in that regard too. You need a strong opposition leader. And there was a line in the Times interview that Farage gave that said, from Stephen Swinford, saying, he's been treated by Starmer as the official leader of the opposition as well. That for Kemi is going to grate a little bit as well.
Well, this is what I find quite extraordinary, because this interview just seems quite angry, ranting about people undermining her. I just don't get it personally what the purpose of this interview was. You're with the Shadow Chancellor, you're in the Isle of Wight, as one of my guests said earlier, a great opportunity to attack Labour on the economy regarding hospitality, retail and leisure, and yet she's gone on to say that people who back Robert Jenrick who aren't happy with her are, quote, sore losers. And it says Nigel Farage is, and I quote, and sorry for Ofcom, but this is a quote from Kemi Badenoch, he's a bullshit artist. I mean, why, Matthew? Why?
I mean,
do you suffer from Kemi derangement syndrome that she says that some people suffer from?
The point is that every party has a whip. Every party has a discipline procedure. If you want to discipline your MPs, only 121 of them, then you can do that behind closed doors. But when it comes out to the public image, when we have this disgraceful two-tier Labour government and effectively the unofficial leader of the opposition, Nigel Farage, and Reform, Kemi needs to use her position in the public as the leader of the opposition for exactly that, offering a vision of difference and hope of a better Britain that we can all live in. But instead, we're too busy slagging each other off. Divided parties fall. We saw that at the last election. The Conservatives absolutely destroyed in most seats because of being a divided party. I know. Being a divided party. We are not going to survive until the next election if this is how we're going to be. I plead to the Conservative Party, clean your dirty laundry behind closed doors, get out there and sell a vision to the public.
Mike, don't you find it really weird that she talks about, and she absolutely has suffered disgusting racial abuse online?
Absolutely, yes.
Probably from bots, but even morons sadly exist online, and morons are morons. But she did this interview and she's doubled down last week, or 2 weeks ago, and she's doubled down that again. Badenoch recently said that she no longer identifies as Nigerian and hasn't renewed her passport since the early noughties, and I quote her now, "I feel British, that is my nationality," she says. "I don't see how, certainly in the job I do, I can be holding two things in my head." What I don't get is, who is she talking to here? Because no one I've spoken to, and all the doors I've knocked has brought up her Nigerian heritage. And in fact, I think it's quite refreshing, that we can accept that people have different heritage. If she feels more British than Nigerian, good on her. And actually, is she leading the Conservative Party? I like to think on meritocracy, not because of identity. But why is she even entertaining the ethno-nationalists online?
Well, political journalism abhors a vacuum, Jonathan. No, this is the fact that the Conservative Party has struggled to articulate its message. And look, a scale of the defeat which they suffered last year, any leader picking that mantle up would have a difficult thing to do. And I think they did the right thing, having a longer leadership contest and allowing a time for a proper transition. There's nothing worse than a rushed period in this as well. What I find interesting is the interview you referenced there in the Times is at the same point in which Robert Jenrick and Chris Phillips were meeting with JD Vance over in the Cotswolds. Now, who looks more statesman-like there? The Shadow Justice Secretary or the Leader of the Opposition there as well? Now, of course, there may have been perfectly legitimate reasons why she chose not to do it. She may have done it to say, actually, I haven't got any reason to go and see JD Vance at this time. But it plays into the hands of her critics inside the party. And the conference, her first conference in charge, when she's pledged to announce this plan to leave the ECHR, is going to be an absolutely fascinating one. But the simple fact is, at the moment, much like the Liberal Party's long period of irrelevance from its exiting government throughout the latter half of the 20th century, the Conservatives don't risk being destroyed, but they risk being worse than that, which is irrelevant as well. And the simple fact is, there will, at this point in time, there probably still is a good core of Conservative activists that will support the party, but they're mostly older activists. 10, 20, 15 years down the line, that is how the party faces extinction, when those activists are gone and the younger generation have come in and they haven't gravitated towards the Tories, they've gone to Reform instead, or worse, they're not voting at all. That is how political parties die.
It is purely a disaster of our own making. We could have lost the last election and gone, do you know what? We're going to rebuild. The pledge is renewal. We're going to rebuild. We're going to renew. We're going to get going. This is what we're going to promise. This is our platform. You know, I've managed to come on this platform many, many times and go, hold my hands up. We messed up the government. That's why we're not the government anymore. But this is what we would do. I'm sorry, but it is not hard. But instead, we've had a vacuum of policies for the last year. Apparently, we're going to get some policies at party conference this year. Well, that'd be great for all 10 people sitting in the audience. It's just infuriating.
Will you be sitting in the audience?
Well, I might be the 11th person, you know, who know. I really plead to the Conservatives.
I feel your anger here, Matthew.
But it's the anger.
Do you think she should go? Do you think she should be leader?
I'm not an MP. I don't get a vote in that.
That's a politician's answer, Matthew. Do you think she should be leader?
It's an honest answer. It's an honest answer. People out there in the public, genuine, normal people in the public, do not care. They just want a government that says, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to deliver it. And at the moment, we have a Labour government that flip-flops on everything, a Reform government saying things that people want, but is miles away from government.
Not a Reform government.
Sorry, a Reform party saying things that people want, but are miles away from government, years away from government, and a Conservative party that, to be fair, with not that much of a swing, could get back into government, almost having nothing. What the state of politics right now? Yes, I'm angry about it. Yes, I'm fed up about it. People are. I am embracing the fury that people are feeling out there on the streets. People who can't find a job. People who can't get back into the market. People seeing more and more of their paycheck go away. I'm sorry, but I will never apologise for being angry, because that's the state of this country.
Well, I must say, I've had a lot of texts coming in supporting Kemi. Another one here from Grainey in Lincolnshire. Kemi refreshingly doesn't dodge questions with word-salad waffle like Starmer. She has a backbone and had the courage to say trans women are biological men back when other MPs were too scared to say it. Great show. So
we want more of it. More of it.
More of that, Kemi. You've heard it from one of your own councillors.
Stop having our own, party battles in public and get out there. Be the change that we can be. Labour won a government by just saying one word: change. Let's do it.
Well, look, big thank you to Mike and big thank you again to Matthew for joining me in the head-to-head today. After the break, we're going to be talking with Thomas Godfrey, the Sun reporter, with an exclusive around an immigration judge refusing to deport a rapist. Shock horror yet again. Call in, text in, and we'll see you soon.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. it is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, Great Britain. Jonathan Gullis sitting in for the amazing Alex Phillips here on the home of common sense. That is Talk. And by me, what a show we've been having. You've been texting, you've been calling, you've been voice noting, and we will get to those voice notes that I've got sat waiting later on in the show. Lots to discuss around illegal migration. Seeing Sir Keir Starmer announce his plan to speed up the appeals process so that we can able to get a decision to bring down the backlog. Kemi Badenoch doing an exclusive in The Times, talking about the fact that she isn't scared of calling out nonsense from Sir Keir Starmer and Nigel Farage. We've also got Nigel Farage saying that he's going to be going to the US to share his views on Lucy Connolly with US congressmen and talking about free speech in the United Kingdom. And we've also been hearing that there might well be an IMF-style bailout, not seen since 1976, because Rachel Reeves has crashed the economy. So much to cover across the papers today, particularly with The Sun, which I'm delighted to say I have got a good friend of ours here in the studio, Mr. Thomas Godfrey, who's got us a Sun exclusive regarding another judge row. I'm going to splash this up on the screen so you can see it. Sorry, I hit the mic, so I'm going to annoy the team behind the glass. New judge row, yet again, new judge row. Refuses to deport rapist drug dealer. What's going on here, Thomas? What on earth is going on?
I mean, this sort of story now, you get it every week, and it seems these decisions that a lot of people like to draw attention to, they all get published online, they're released by the judiciary. But actually, if you do some background digging into the potential motivations of some of these judges, yes, they swear an oath to remain impartial, but how impartial can you be if, even 15, 20 years ago, you worked for an organisation that was explicitly pro-migrant? And this is the situation now Melissa Canavan, one of the judges on the upper tier tribunal, finds herself in, where about 6 months ago or so, she refused to deport someone who was jailed for 7 years for rape. He was from Jamaica, entered in 2001. He made the case that he was bisexual, though the Home Office lawyers could find no evidence of him having had a relationship with a man since being in Britain. He raped a woman while at a party, and then in court claimed that he did not know doing that was illegal. An original judge on the first tier tribunal allowed his appeal on human rights grounds. He claimed he could be persecuted if he was sent back to Jamaica, and this case fell to Melissa Canavan, who decided that original decision, for whatever reason, was correct. And so this man was able to stay. Although, of course, in the past, she had been giving advice to asylum seekers for free at an organisation called the Refugee Legal Centre, and I think most staggeringly of all, and blatantly of all, had written for a magazine called Socialist Lawyer. I don't know about you, Jonathan, but I think if I wrote for a magazine, had my byline in a magazine called Socialist Lawyer, I could have no qualms when someone later turned around and said, well, are you sure you're not a socialist lawyer? And by proxy has become potentially a judge with, as Robert Jenrick says in the paper today, open borders views.
Well, as you say, Robert Jenrick has rightly did a piece recently where he said he's going to take on judicial activism in this country as part of his brief as the Shadow Justice Secretary, where he said he said that it's mind-blowing move to let the rapist remain was an example of an immigration judge, quote, whose political views happen to overlap with their decision. She's on a nice 170k a year salary in order to make decisions like this that says that a literal rapist who claims he didn't know rape was illegal should somehow be allowed to remain in this country. I mean, I'm sorry, Miss Canavan, but you are so out of touch with reality and you're quite clearly tainted by your own personal politics that you undermine the very judiciary that you seek to defend. And the problem is that the public, once they lose faith in their judiciary and they lose faith in their politicians, which is already a problem, then anarchy could be on our streets. And that is the last thing any of us want to see. I mean, you say there that you've also looked at Judge Fiona Beach in them recently as well, who's also part of the bail for immigration detainee sector. So this is not the first case.
It's not the first judge. There have been multiple examples of this. Last year, there was another judge, Sarah Pinder, had written an article in which she said immigration detention centres, the places that she's meant to put criminals who are awaiting deportation, she called them abhorrent. I mean, they are detention centres for people in this country illegally. And she called those centres abhorrent. And Fiona Beach last week, we told how she allowed a knife-wielding drug dealer from France, so a perfectly safe country, to remain in Britain. She said his crimes weren't serious enough and he wasn't a threat to the public. That was him offending after he'd been released from prison as well. So he'd already had one stint in prison, came out, offended again, and was still, supposedly, not a big enough threat to the public. And she was on the board of a charity called Asylum Aid. She was on the board for nearly 3 years. And obviously later down the line has gone on to become a judge on, as you say, a lovely 6-figure pay packet that absolutely no one would mind having. I'd quite like 170 grand a year.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, look, these examples, they're numerous. They're everywhere, and what's staggering to me is that it's not actually taken a great deal of digging to work this out. It's not taken months of work. These are very clear-cut examples, and I think, as Robert Jenrick says this morning, and I think as you've just said there, it is going to cause people to lose trust in the judiciary. We already have the claims of two-tier justice around some of the sentencings and some of the criminal case outcomes we've seen in the last few months, and these types of examples, which are dozens in their numbers now, is only going to make those calls louder.
The fact that he's worried that he would, quote, face persecution back in Jamaica, that's not my problem. That's not the British taxpayers' problem. That's certainly not his victims' problem. That's a him problem. And quite frankly, he deserves to be persecuted and isolated from society if you could do something so heinous and cruel and cold as that. So, I mean, just another example. I'm assuming you're popular now with the judiciary, who I know are very quick to always attack anyone who does such stories for saying they undermine legal process, and you get all the bar organisations saying this is an attack on, democracy, attack on our legal system.
But it is important. Judges are an extension of the state. They are an arm of the state, and increasingly judges with cases like this are interpreting the regulations in their own ways, and sometimes those ways are unique, might be a diplomatic word of describing it, but the outcomes where criminals like this, who the Home Office are trying to deport, it's not a case of the government being soft touch here, they're actually being prevented. And this deportation was started under the previous government, it continued under the current government. So actually on this rapist, at least, the governments were aligned in trying to get rid of him. And there's another example where Judge Canavan allowed a crack cocaine dealer who's 24 to stay in the country because he was, quote, young for his age and naive. And she feared he would go astray if he returned to, wait for it, Italy. I mean, people go on holiday to Italy. I'd quite like to go to Italy. I mean, it's just absolutely staggering. That man, the crack cocaine dealer, didn't even turn up for his own hearing and still got off. Still allowed to stay in the country. Didn't even bother to turn up. Showed so little respect for the judicial processes of our country, and actually for the country itself. He was, back against the wall, about to be flown home. Thought, you know what, I'll skip that one. I'll stay at home today. I'll go and get a coffee or something. And he won.
I avoided doing it yesterday, but I'm doing it today, which is banging my head on the desk because I'm sick to the back teeth of these stupid decisions that just are not based in any common sense as far as I can see it, and certainly not based in the common sense element of defending the people of this country from people who pose a threat. The whole point of once you're convicted is to make sure that you no longer pose a threat to the public. And people who don't have a right to be here, who are guests of this country, have then broken our laws and caused harm upon our citizens, it should be simple. You are detained, you are deported, whether you be an illegal migrant or a foreign national offender. No other countries put up with this. We for some reason, are obsessed with being so overtly polite. It drives me round the bend. And then you get to another great story here in The Sun. Fury as top London stores forced to take drastic action to tackle rampant shoplifting in lawless London. Stores on the top London high street have imposed a locked door policy because of rampant shoplifting. Customers must knock to get staff to let them in to some businesses on the Strand in the West End. Posh women's clothes store Jigsaw has put a notice warning shoppers they will have to wait to be allowed in. It reads, "We are operating a locked door policy. Please knock and a member of staff will be with you shortly." It adopted the idea from an O2 shop across the road. The phone retailer trialled the scheme after robberies in St Albans, Hertfordshire, before extending it to London. I mean, I've had Fraser Nelson trying to say that this country has seen crime halved in total. Sadiq Khan says that crime under his watch has come down, although the statistics say something very different. I suppose the great thing with statistics is it depends which survey or statistics you wish to use. Apparently, using, in Fraser Nelson's idea, recorded crime data with the police is not as accurate as some survey done by the ONS. I find that quite remarkable and hard to believe. So yet again, Reform UK use summer recess when most politicians go away, own the issue of lawless Britain. They then double down on lawless London with their Westminster City Councillor Layla Cunningham, who obviously herself is a barrister. And now we see the fact that time and again we've got even City Hall leader Susan Hall, calling this is Mayor Sadiq Khan's lawless London. I mean, have you ever seen something so sad?
It just shows you how far we've fallen. I mean, this is the Strand in London, and Jonathan, to let you into a secret of how I got this story, I went out for a walk, very simply. I decided I was going to go to the National Gallery, go and have a look around, and went to get myself a coffee, walked past the O2 store, thought, it's a bit strange. Got my coffee, crossed over the road, walked back and saw this Jigsaw and thought, there's another one. I mean, it's just everywhere, but it's the fact it's that noticeable now to just everyday people. It's that noticeable that these stores feel the only way to protect themselves from shoplifting is to make customers, people who are paying to go in the store and buy things, embarrassingly knock on the door to be let in. I mean, it just feels like a total upheaval of what the shopping process is. People come to London, tourists from around the world, to go shopping. We have some of the best high streets in the world. People want to come here, see the shops, and if they turn up at the door and actually have to knock to get in, I mean, they're going to think they're trying to get into someone's house, not into a store, which they've travelled from around the world to come and see. And you're right, I mean, this scheme was brought in by O2 because thugs in balaclavas kept breaking into their stores and trying to steal phones. And with a closed store, it is an occupational hazard. You can walk in, grab stuff off the rails, simply walk out, no one will stop you. It just shows how desperate shopkeepers are becoming. They feel like they're being battered from all sides, whether it's national insurance going up, whether it's just surging rates of crime. And talk about statistics, the one that matters is that shoplifting is up 48% in a year in London. 90,000 cases, about 250 a day recorded in 2024.
And they're the ones being recorded?
They're the ones being recorded. A lot of shops, and we did an investigation into Greggs earlier this year where people were just walking in, taking stuff and walking out. They don't report any
Greggs
of that.
are not exactly known for being high-end, expensive food.
No. You walk in, go in the fridge, take what you want, simply walk out.
And they're not reporting?
They basically don't bother because it's pointless. It is absolutely pointless. You will not catch people because the impetus is not there. The police don't have enough resources, not enough people, and a lot of the time, frankly, don't feel like it's worth doing. I've heard of friends of mine who have things stolen from them. They get mugged, they get their bag nicked in pubs, and they report it to the police, and one of them was genuinely asked, do you want us to investigate or do you just want a crime reference number for insurance? And it's a case of, well, actually, no, I'd like the police to do what the police were set up to do. Can they solve every single crime? Potentially not. But there are so many cases now, the overwhelming majority of theft and shoplifting cases where they do not even identify a suspect.
Well, Thomas, in The Sun, your colleague Sophia Slay on page 2 has got the story about shoplifters and sex face being banned from footy matches and going abroad under tough new laws. Here's Shabana Mahmood's answer to the questions that you at The Sun have been posing and the British people are wanting to hear. We're going to see judges are going to get new powers to prevent offenders, including shoplifters and sex pests, doing things they enjoy, such as going to matches or gigs and travelling abroad. Shabana Mahmood's comment, which... someone loves a bit of alliteration rhyming. With the football season back in full swing, I know Sun on Sunday readers nationwide will be back on the terraces this weekend. But if you're a criminal who loves the game, we're bringing in new laws to hit you where it hurts. Judges will have new powers to ban offenders from matches, leaving the stands for law-abiding fans. Shabana Mahmood's going to smash this, isn't she, Thomas? She's going to Labour on top of this. This is going to bring harmony to our streets.
Well, we'll have to see. It's a pilot scheme. Who knows what will happen, if it will work, if it won't work. I think what's really important is that there isn't really such a thing as a minor crime, especially crimes that have victims. And this has to be watertight, this scheme. If you're going to do it 100%, do it properly. Make sure people really feel the pain. You're a Fulham fan, as you said off camera. I think not that many Fulham fans, I'm sure, would be out shoplifting at the weekend. But
we're far too nice a club.
Exactly.
we have the neutral stand, for goodness' sake. That's how soft we are.
Very expensive tickets in the neutral stand.
Very expensive tickets. Yes, I've had my moans. Don't you worry.
But I'd imagine that will it make shoplifters think twice before taking something from Tesco or nicking something from Greggs? Maybe, if they're that into their football, potentially.
And that's if the police even investigate it and find them.
Exactly, and this is the point. All of this talk about punishment is one thing. Catching these people is the really important thing. Is that going to actually happen, or will criminals be able to roam the streets with impunity as they have done now for years? The idea that electronic tags could stop them going to concerts or even taking a holiday, well, again, these things work in practice, but there is just so many examples of lags being able to flout these laws, flout these supposed punishments, and just go on holiday anyway, brazenly. And then when they're caught, a lot of the time, they don't actually then get punished for breaking the terms of the original punishment. And so if Labour are going to do this, and if they're going to get it right, it has to be, as we say in the leader column today, it has to be absolutely watertight, because although they work on paper, in practice, they end up being weak.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Thomas Godfrey, thank you so much for joining us in the studio today and for sharing those Sun exclusives. Make sure you get your Sun on Sunday for all the great stories that are being unearthed. And I want to know, do you think Miss Canavan should apologise for the decision she made? Should we be able to appeal her decision and see this rapist deported back to Jamaica, regardless of any persecution he would face? I don't give a damn. I don't think you'll give a damn. But you can tell us 03444 999 1000. There we go. Got the number right eventually. You can also WhatsApp and voice note us on that too, as well as text into talk with talk at start your message to 87222 and message and follow us on X at talkTV. And I'm going to play one more voice note that we've been having in. Lots of people getting in so far. Mark has got a little voice note for us saying we're heading for catastrophe because of Labour policies.
Jonathan, it's Mark here in Norfolk. We're heading for catastrophe because Labour has set its policies to level down. Everyone equally poor is their idea of equality. At a time when 52% of UK households make no net contribution to the tax take, why do we insist on chasing the other 48% for more and more, instead of encouraging the lower half to earn more and pay their share? We need growth. We're simply encouraging lethargy and killing ambition with our reliance on the successful and the responsible. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for messaging in and voice noting in. And as I say, 03444 499 1000 is how you can do that. And guess what? You've got far more common sense in your little fingers than most of those people sat in SW1 in Westminster. I can assure you of that. We'll have a short break and we'll get more views and more stories soon.
what we see with the protests there, I see really a class divide. I'm really proud to be working class. I come from a council house in Bolton. I live in Stoke-on-Trent. And what I see with these protests in Epping, and you've got all across the country as far as Perth in Scotland, Cardiff in Wales, but across England as well, is the working class people who live, a few miles away from those hotels, who are simply sick and tired of this. They're sick and tired of people being shipped in who they know nothing about.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello everybody, Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Alex Phillips on Weekend Breakfast here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk, and we've been having a great show. We obviously ran that story earlier about the disgusting behaviour of GB Paralympians who turned their back on the Israeli national anthem in some sort of weird faux outrage protest. Texter here, Francis from Sussex, to fund the Paralympians, why should they be funded by the British people? I couldn't agree more. And another one here from Stephen Millings in Belfast. Team GB should lose all national funding for their childish gesture. Just disgusting, and certainly doesn't represent me. Well, there you go. People are still rightly outraged at the disgraceful behaviour of those GB Olympians. But we go now to another guest. He's joining me down the line. His name is Mr. James Matthewson. He's a former Labour spokesperson. Hello, James. How are you?
I'm great, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good, and thank you for joining us. And I'd just quite like to get your view on this. Do you think it was appropriate for the Paralympians there to turn their back on the Israeli flag and national anthem in what I would call some faux outrage stunt designed to get cheap likes on social media?
I just find it fascinating that some of your viewers and listeners are outraged and want to defund Team GB.
Well, isn't Team GB, Matthew, meant to represent all of Great Britain? And that means that does include people who are Jewish, that does include people who are supportive of Israel's right to exist.
But people are people and they have opinions. And when a country's committing a genocide against a people, you're not going to be able to stop people from campaigning and standing up and speaking out. Many people are rightly outraged by Israel's actions, and they're going to reflect that. Sport's always been a place for doing that as well, by the way. Whether it be World Cups, whether it be the Olympics, people have always had a proud record of standing up against those things.
Well, it's true, James, isn't it? We saw Munich in 1972, the Palestinian Black September mob who murdered Israeli athletes, and obviously Jeremy Corbyn himself laying a wreath at the memorial for those Black September terrorists. I mean, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it, that this would be somehow just rubbing salt in the wound of a state that's only acting in its own self-defence because of Hamas's atrocities.
No, I mean, we go down that rabbit hole. We're never going to agree, Jonathan, because I see a genocide and you don't, and as do these athletes. And I just find it fascinating that the patriotism of some people stops the second people have opinions. And they think that, Paralympians, especially Paralympians, by the way, people who live with disability, and who are up against immense challenges and who we should be immensely proud of, regardless of their political opinions. That everybody wants nobody to have political opinions yet wants to express their own very loudly and very proudly. Makes no sense.
Well, James, when I want to watch Olympians, what I want them to do is play sport. I don't want to see their virtue signaling politics.
Well, I'm sorry, Jonathan. That's you don't get to dictate what they do.
Well, that's true, but I can demand that my taxpayers' money isn't used to fund them if they're going to act in such a childish manner.
Right. If you only want your taxpayers' money to fund things you agree with, then you're going to be in for a lot of disappointment.
But James, that's not what I'm saying, is it? What I'm saying is those people can hold those views, absolutely, and in their own private time can express those views. But when they're wearing the Union flag on their chest with pride, I would like to think, and representing this great nation, then they're there to represent all of us. And when they're being funded by the taxpayer, they should act appropriately.
No, they're representing themselves as well. You don't stop being human because you've put on a uniform or a flag, okay? You represent the country in the sport, and we should be very proud of them for doing so. And like I say, especially Paralympians who do who have an immensely, huge challenge. Some of their journeys are hugely inspirational on the way there. For them to be standing up and saying this. I would say rather than jumping on them and attacking them, we should be listening to them and listening to what their concerns are, the concerns of many, many millions of people around the globe, myself included.
James, as you say, I think we'll agree to disagree on that particular topic. Let's go to our next one, where maybe we'll continue to agree to disagree, which is Nigel Farage says Reform UK will pledge 5 deportation flights today. This is following the big exclusive yesterday in the Times, where we'll see more detail on Tuesday. He plans 5 deportation flights today, leave the ECHR, scrap the Human Rights Act, divert from the UN Refugee Convention and the Agreement on Human Torture, introduce a British Bill of Rights, arrest all those who arrive illegally, detain them on disused military bases, offer people to self-deport for £2,500 and a free flight, or end up going back to your country of origin, to countries like Afghanistan, where Nigel Farage said he'll do a deal, or go to safe third countries like Rwanda or the Essential Islands. Sorry, I just wanted to outline for listeners to make sure they heard the full plan that has so far been briefed into the paper. I mean, isn't this common sense? Isn't Keir Starmer kind of chasing Nigel Farage on this with his announcement today?
He is, you're absolutely right, which is horrifying to me and to many, many millions of Labour supporters, by the way. The fact that Keir Starmer can't just stand on principles, I think largely because he hasn't got any, and actually take a stand of his own and make a case, right? What we've seen with Nigel Farage and the Reform Party, what we've seen with many people on the right of politics around the immigration debate, is something I disagree with, I'm hugely angry about and furious about. However, they are making the case for their own opinion on this, okay? What I would like to see is, I would like to see a Labour government in power stand on the values of the trade union movement, of the Labour movement, and say this is why we believe in an asylum system. This is why we believe in being members of the ECHR and other international conventions that are important, and actually make the case to the British people, because that's what they should be doing, rather than actually parroting Nigel Farage and tacking to the right. Because if they think that's going to help them at the next election, I think they'll be sorely disappointed.
Do you think that the only hope for Labour supporters like yourself and many of its members across the country too is you see Zach Polanski, for example, potentially elected as the leader of the Green Party, Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana's temporarily named or referred to your party that obviously will have a future conference. Do you think that's the only way to drag Labour back to left? A bit like some would say the Conservatives have been dragged to the right by Reform UK.
In a way, I know the Labour Party, and I just do not feel that outside of the tent. I wrote a piece in the Eye a couple of weeks ago about that very issue, and in it I condemned Jeremy's new project. I don't think it's the right thing to do. I think it's going outside of a tent. Look, the Labour Party, as Dennis Skinner once said, is not it's not a Rolls Royce, it's not a fancy car, but it is the best vehicle in town for progressive people in Britain. Unfortunately, under our political system, I believe it's the only party with the infrastructure to do that. So trying to change things inside the tent would be my preference. But look, I'm not even supporting the Labour Party right now in government because I'm not agreeing with anything they're doing, frankly. So I can see the frustrations. But I look to the left, I look to progressive politics, and I just do not see a way forward. People like Zach Polanski, very inspirational, very great, but I just do not see the cohesion and the ability for people to come together and put things forward. Some of your viewers and listeners will be thrilled about that, by the way, but it's hugely frustrating as somebody on the left. And I want to be able to make my case, Jonathan. I want to be able to stand up, and whether we disagree on it, I want people to be able to say, this is what we believe in and why. And I don't see that. I see fear, I see paralysis, and I see an increasingly hostile environment to that kind of politics.
So would you be concerned, for example, by the protests we've seen outside migrant hotels and the Operation Raise the Flag that's been going on across the country? Do you think, or do you disagree with what I would refer to, James, you won't be shocked, as patriots who are standing up for their community, demanding safety on their streets, particularly with the Bell Hotel, where we know two individuals have been charged with serious sexual offences, albeit they deny those charges and are due to face court. Obviously, other incidents where we just had the discussion with editor Thomas Godfrey from The Sun that says that a judge didn't deport someone to Jamaica, even though they are a convicted rapist, because they feared about persecution. Isn't this why it is right, like Graham Stringer, a Labour MP himself, is saying, that we should be leaving the ECHR in order to take back control of our borders, take back control of our country, and put the British people first?
I think I just need to commend Mr. Nigel Farage, to be honest, because he has managed to shift the political landscape to a point where we now have Labour MPs calling to leave the ECHR, which is just, I mean, if we just all take a moment, I know we've been through a lot in the past 10 years. Politically, it's fascinating, isn't it, right? The situation that we're now in. And yes,
and just to add, James, sorry, very quickly, just to add, there's that Labour MP in Mansfield who also spoke to The Sun, published yesterday, and said that we should be looking to reintroduce the Rwanda-style scheme. I mean, the Overton window is moving.
That's literally what they were elected on opposing, right? Yeah. Like, that's what they stood at the election about. It just fascinates me. And look, there will always be fair weather politicians, right? One thing I'll say about you is that you weren't. I think you stood on things that you didn't shift on. Much to my frustration, I wish more people would shift. However, you have to believe in something and go into politics. And I think the whole issue right now with the Labour Party and the government is people look to them and they think, I would love to see you believe in something honestly and genuinely, and they don't see that. They see somebody coming out with a shopping list and say, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to help you? How do you want me to respond? Desperately looking for votes and support. And frankly, they need to look and learn from the reform message, which is, we're going to lose support from some people. Some people aren't going to like us, aka me, right? I'm never going to vote for them. But we don't need everyone to win elections. And that should be something that the Labour Party, in its proud history, the past 100 or so years that it's existed, should be proud to stand on. And I don't see that, unfortunately.
No, it's interesting, isn't it? Like you say, I look back in my time in Parliament, and there are things, for example, when Boris Johnson introduced an additional tax for social care, and I voted for it, even though I vehemently disagree with it, and that's the type of thing that haunts me still to this day, that there are certain votes, I think even on net zero, where I follow the party whip in those early days.
Would you do it differently if you could go back?
Oh, 100%. I would on those type of issues. There was about 100 MPs, I think, who rebelled on that particular new tax. I should have been there. I was, like, minutes away, but kind of bought into the whole United Party front. And whilst the United Party is important and does win you elections, and it is important to remember that there's always give and take. You have to be pragmatic. That ate so much into my... Well, just because it ate so much into...
Isn't it?
Well, yeah, and because it ate so much into my own core principles, I've really struggled post-parliamentary life to look back and go, how did I sell myself out on those particular things when there are other things maybe that I would have been willing to do deals on looking down. I think that's why if I look at my second half of my parliamentary career, I was much more louder, although I was probably loud the whole time, but I was certainly much more sort of stuck in standing up for what I believed in, and certainly upset the Chief Whip, hence why the former Chief Whip, Simon Hart, now a Lord, refers to me as to being, I think, like a Labrador, something that you love, but inherently also acts naughtily at times as well. But I think, I look back on that and I think you're right. I see lots of Labour MPs, even one of my successor, David Williams in Stoke-on-Trent North, albeit obviously he hasn't got the right to reply, so I'll be careful. But some of the things that he has voted on, I fundamentally know he completely and utterly opposed. For a man who ran under Jeremy Corbyn in 2017 to be voting for some of the things that have been going through now, I just think for those Labour MPs, no matter what you then try and do to separate yourself from your leaders, the public aren't fooled. They'll know how you voted and what you voted for.
Well, that's it. I've stood with many of these people, right? I've stood with them on, whether it be on picket lines, with striking workers, and then all of a sudden they're voting against trade union proposals and not supporting the trade unions who backed them and got them into power. And not many people criticise, especially in conservative media, criticise the trade unions and Labour's link and the fact that unions fund their electoral campaigns. But you have to remember that union money is like lollipop ladies, right? It's like people on factory floors. That they give their money so that they can get their Labour MPs elected to have representation. And then all of a sudden, if those Labour MPs turn around and say, you know what, actually, your proposals that you've put to me, I'm not even going to listen to them. I'm just going to listen to the party leadership, because they fall into that trap of believing about a united front, a cohesion. This is our one chance in government. But if you shift too much on that, and I was critical of the exact reason I was critical of the Corbyn leadership after I left working for it was because it was too ideological. There was too much ideological purity, right? There wasn't enough pragmatism. However, we've gone the opposite way now with Starmer's leadership. You look at it, you think, what do you believe in? What are the core values? And there's nothing grounding it or rooting it. And unfortunately, Reform UK do have supposed values that are different to mine, rooting them and grounding them. And I think that's what makes them attractive to especially many young people.
Final one from me, James. I'm just keen to get your view, obviously, as someone who's worked in comms. Obviously, we've seen Angela Rayner here on the front page of The Sun and the Mail being attacked for her 3 pads. I said it's quite disingenuous because one of those pads is a grace and favour pad given by the government to someone like the Deputy Prime Minister, which she should absolutely be entitled to. And I said, if I was offered it, I'd take it, so I'm not going to attack her for that. So obviously, she's bought a home in Hove, I think it is, for around £700,000. Many people were saying it's hypocrisy because of her previous stance on saying that that she would like to see tax reforms aimed at curbing second home ownership, particularly in seaside resorts. But I also find the pictures that they use of her really weird. I mean, her wearing that sort of dry coat or whatever it is, that you wear on the beach with a glass of wine, I thought that was pretty cool. That's the type of person I want to see because that is what normal people do. I think the photo of her having a vape on a paddleboard or whatever it is that she's on is also fine because guess what? Lots of people do it. I find it weird, right? Because I know Angela and I've said I got to know her and I've always found her to be very friendly, very kind, very polite. And I think actually a lot of people underestimate. She's probably the most frontline Labour politician that we've got who's got the best chance of connecting with the voter base that is looking currently from Labour to Reform UK.
Honestly, Angela, I've been frustrated with some of the things she's had to do. I'm sure Angela is frustrated with some of the things she's had to do. You know, she has had to decide many times whether she continues sitting at the cabinet table and tries to influence things from the inside, which is, you know, probably the best thing to do in the circumstances, or actually walk away from this project. And she's stayed with it. And as a result, she's had everything thrown at her. And it's funny, isn't it? There's cabinet members there, Yvette Cooper. I mean, Rachel Reeves gets it, but she's the Chancellor. But, you know, many of them don't get this kind of, I don't know, this snobbery that it feels like that Angela gets, this looking down the media's nose at her. And you're absolutely right. You know, they always try and catch her with a vape in the hand, the drink in the hand. She's a normal person, right? Yeah. I've always found her to be very, very genuine. Buying 3 houses, right? Look, Angela has been successful in her life. I just don't understand how these same people who want to talk about ambition and coming out of working class communities, because she was a carer, because she had a really rough start in life, are you not then meant to succeed? Because you know how hard it is on the left as well, by the way. That one of my biggest frustrations on the left and being a socialist is that many people take issue with ambition. They see it as a dirty word. And I don't think that should be the case at all. Whilst I believe in a strong state and I believe in all those things and values other socialists believe in, I also believe in the fact that, you know, I'm not anti-capitalist. It's socialism, not communism. And the whole point is, for me, that people should be able to do well if they want to do well. And if that's their focus in life, Angela has done well. And people will say it's at the taxpayer's expense. You know, this is politics. This is working in politics. We either want to be able to reward our public servants, and compared to things like banking and all the rest of it, it's now, is it really? I mean, you know this. I just find it fascinating that that's the focus right now.
I will say, James, that I think politicians survive predominantly on those who pass the "would you have a pint with them" test. And I tell you what, Nigel Farage all day long and have a pint. I'd have a pint with Angela Rayner all day long too. I think it'd be a bloody good laugh. Thank you so much, James Mathewson, former Labour spokesperson, for joining us on the show today. Really appreciate getting your views. We'll go to a quick break. We've got more to come up regarding Harry and Meghan are reportedly looking to make a Netflix documentary about Princess Diana. Grown incoming.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello everybody, lovely to see you. Welcome back. We are on the countdown till I hand over to Peter Cardwell later on today, so we will make sure we get to our next guest. Her name is Charlotte Griffiths. She's the editor-at-large for the Mail on Sunday and a royal commentator. Hello there, Charlotte. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today to share this story. Shock horror. Harry and Meghan have been thinking about how to grift off Netflix a bit further. Now they want to make a documentary regarding Princess Diana as part of their first new first look deal. It says here, the new deal, which was announced this month, gives Netflix first reviews on any of the couple's suggestions while covering their Archewell Productions overheads, including its office and staff costs. I mean, are you looking forward to a Princess Diana documentary made by Prince Harry? I mean, it's going to be exploiting his mother, isn't it? It feels a bit like that.
I think so. It's going to come out in 2027 if it goes ahead, to celebrate, well, I suppose commiserate, on 30 years since she died tragically in a car crash. I thought the article was really interesting because it said that it's on a long list and Harry is yet to actually approve the idea. My theory, reading between the lines of the article, is that it's Meghan or Netflix's idea. Harry's been sort of offered the idea, oh, you know, you could maybe do something about your mother. And Harry's sort of thinking about it, probably reading the tea leaves, trying to get a sense of how it will go down, I think probably very badly, before he commits to it. But with this first look deal, they have to come up with an interesting idea. So one of their other ideas, which I think is going ahead, is it's very noble. It's about, you know, children who are sadly suffering from poverty in Africa. Now, you know, I get that, of course, that's a big passion of Harry's, but is it going to be a big, you know, ratings winner? Probably not. So they've got to kind of find another idea that relates him to the royal family. That's what he trades off.
Isn't this going to make it harder for that rift to be healed? We know that there's been talks between camps, which is sad in itself. No one wants to see a father and a son not in communication. I would be heartbroken if my son wasn't speaking to me, and I would be doing everything I could to make sure that there was never a divide between my child and myself, because I think being a father is one of the greatest gifts, just like being a mother is one of the greatest gifts in life, that if you're fortunate enough to be able to have a be so, you can do. And this is, and certainly with his brother, the future king, who we know this is a very raw topic as well. Won't this just put any reconciliation plans to bed?
Yeah, I do feel with William, this is the kind of thing that will incense him. But they've always had this kind of rivalry about their mother. It's extraordinary. And Harry always says, well, she was my mother too. So he'll feel justified in doing it. But certainly it will, any chances of reconciliation in 2027 between him and William will be over. I think it won't affect, it's quite clever because it probably won't affect his relationship so badly with Charles, because Charles will understand he wants to look into his mother's death and commemorate his mother in some way. And it doesn't in any way, you know, slag off the royal family again. It's not kind of revisiting all of those chapters. So it's slightly moving the narrative on, but it's still, of course, harping back to the royal family. And, you know, Harry does sort of have a right to say, well, she was my mother too.
Indeed. And lastly, do you think with Meghan in the background that, do you think that she will be heavily featured in potentially any of these documentaries around Princess Diana? Do you think she's very much going to be the director behind the scenes, as it were? You know, with her acting background, she'll certainly know how to create kind of the theatre of it. But do you also think that there's a chance for any reconciliation with her and the royal family, or do you think she's well and truly out in the cold as far as that's concerned?
She's out in the cold. I think she's actually happy out in the cold. And I think she probably will support any quest of Harry's to reunite with his family, especially in 2027, because that's when Invictus comes over to Birmingham. So he will be coming to the UK. She will be seeing this as a pragmatic, important step to reconcile with his family by then. But will she be? She'd be absolutely mad to get involved in this Diana programme. I mean, I do think she's obsessed with Diana, by the way. I think she thinks about her all the time. I think she's tried to recreate Diana in some ways in the past, especially in terms of images of her. You know, there are lots of pictures out there you'll see on the internet of Meghan seeming to recreate kind of Diana's iconic look, wearing a Northwestern jumper. She is definitely going to be involved in this project. But if she was to be front of camera on it, I'd be very surprised. It would be so foolish. But then again, these two never cease to amaze me in what they're willing to do to get those ratings in.
Well, thank you so much for that, Charlotte. That's editor-at-large for the Mail on Sunday and Royal commentator Charlotte Griffiths. Blimey, you've been getting in touch with us. We've got here a little voice note, again, this time from, I think it was Lisa. Migrants claiming innocence of the law. Lisa, let's hear what you've got to say.
Good morning, Jonathan. It's Lisa from Durham here. With regards to the illegal immigrants that come in and plead ignorance against some of the things that they've been accused of, I was always of the understanding that ignorance of the law is and should not be mitigation for defence. Am I right? Am I wrong? Great job. Love the show.
Well, thank
Bye.
you. Oh, sorry, I got eager there. That was great. And first of all, thank you so much for the kind words about the show. Number two, I'm with you. There should never be ignorance of the law. And quite frankly, it's a weak excuse. Well, look, we're going to go to the break because I'm going to be joined by Conservative Party Chairman Kevin Hollinrake MP after the break to ask him some questions and share with him some positive news about the text regarding his leader, Kemi Badenoch.
Nigel's going to end the little boats crossings in 2 weeks. I have about as much faith in him doing that as we all have in Donald Trump having attained peace in 24 hours, which he hasn't done. It reminds me of the guy down the pub who says, I know what to do, we'll take £10 billion and we'll send them all back to where they came from. It's not that simple.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Everyone, Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Alex Phillips for the final segment before I hand over to Peter Caldwell, a talented extraordinaire, to guide you through the following hours. We go straight to my next guest. He's joining me down the line. His name is Kevin Hollinrake MP. He is the chairman of the Conservative Party. Hello, Kevin. How are you?
I'm good. Morning, Jonathan. Very well, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Kevin. I want to quickly go to the Sunday Times Magazine exclusive with Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservative Party. The headline says, there are racists who say I reached the top only because I'm black. I've got to be honest with you, Kevin. I read the interview. It felt like she was just sort of quite angry. It felt like she was sort of moaning about things. I didn't get what the point of the interview was. I felt like when she was in the Isle of Wight, when she's with Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor, she could have done a really good piece about the economy and how Labour's trashing hospitality, retail and leisure. But maybe I'm just being a grump first thing in the morning, Kevin. So from that piece, what do you think we should take about Kemi Badenoch?
Well, the first thing you should take from Kemi Badenoch is she's just the person we need to lead this country. We've been too weak for too long, Jonathan, and she's the strength we need. Strongest person in politics, in my view, is my experience of her working for her in the Department of Business and Trade as a minister, and that's my experience now too. One thing you will acknowledge is that you don't actually control what newspapers write about you or broadcasters say about you. And I'm sure there was lots of conversation on those days. I think there was 2 or 3 occasions she was with that particular journalist. I'm sure the economy came up, But as I say, you don't control what they're going to say about you.
And do you think this is important for the voters to get to know her? I mean, Kemi does talk, obviously, a bit about her family and with her husband and her children. She does mention about the fact that she no longer identifies as Nigerian. My worry there, Kevin, is that she's actually feeding the ethno-nationalists that online give her terrible racist abuse, and they're scumbags and should be called out for doing so. But the people I come across, which is the overwhelming majority of this country, don't care about whether her parents and she herself has any Nigerian heritage. I think actually a lot of the texts that have been coming in of saying she's plain speaking, she's frank, she's got spine. They say she's needs to kick out some of the liberals in the Tory party, Kevin, some of your colleagues and former colleagues of mine, I've got to say. But overall, we've had a great reception, the strongest I've seen from Kemi in a while. So do you think that she's turning a tide with the public, albeit obviously the polling's not been great for a while, but is that more to do with the brand being damaged rather than Kemi?
I think she's turning the tide, yes, and I think people are recognising the real Kemi. And I think she says that interview it takes 2 years. A party that's been hit so hard at the ballot box to turn things around. So I think it will take time, but I think people will recognise she's got the strength that we need, as I say, and she's authentic. She's never let skin colour be something that defines her, quite rightly, and not only that, she's never let other people of different ethnicities define them either. She said there's the least racist country in the world, although she is saying quite rightly that there are some very unsavoury elements that you refer to that actually want to see everybody of any non-white ethnicity removed from this country. These people are purely bonkers.
Yes.
But no, I think Kemi judge her on her character, not on her skin colour or anything else, and she wants to be judged by what she will do. I say that the most important thing people will realise about Kemi is that she's a true conservative and she will have no truck with anybody who is liberal in our party. And but also she is strong and determined and she'll do exactly what she says. And that's going to be refreshing for a lot of people who feel very let down by the current government and indeed previous governments.
And she does say one thing, Kevin, that certainly grabbed the attention of myself, and I apologise for Ofcom reasons in advance, but she refers to Nigel Farage as a bullshit artist. That's a direct quote. Apologies again for Ofcom reasons. Do you think Nigel is that?
Well, I probably wouldn't have chosen those words, but I understand why she did. I mean, I think the thing is, I don't blame anybody for voting reform, and we want to see those Conservative voters who are voting reform come back to us because, I do understand people feel let down by some of the things we do. I can point to some successes, but nevertheless, there were mistakes too. But Nigel Farage just tells people what they want to hear. And that's what she means. At the end of the day, he's a phony. He can't deliver on some of these outlandish promises, particularly on the economy. I mean, he's underwater. His spending plans are underwater by about £120 billion a year. It is bonkers. And one of the things you've seen on the front of the Sunday Telegraph today is that where we are today is it may be the case that we need to go to the IMF for a bailout like we did in 1976. Because of another Labour government with Dennis Healey as Chancellor and because of Rachel Reeves' mistakes and purely nonsensical economic policy, that's where we may be. Now, how can you add on to that another £120 billion a year of tax cuts and extra spending? It is not possible. That's what she means. Nigel Farage, I'm sorry to say, is a phony who just wants to pull everything down rather than build things up.
And with that, Nigel Farage, obviously yesterday in the Sun and the Times, he outlined finally, people would say, reforms plan for deportations of illegal migrants, using ex-military bases to detain 24,000 individuals, 5 flights a day for deportation, immediate arrest upon arrival in this country, leave the ECHR, scrap the Human Rights Act, derogate from the Refugee Convention and agreement against human torture, introduce a British Bill of Rights, offer people voluntarily £2,500 if they choose to deport themselves, and the flight fare covered at the taxpayer's expense too. A lot in there, a lot of stuff that people might go, yeah, this is good, this is what they want to hear. What do you think of the plan? Is this something that the Conservatives and Reform could unite behind, or do you think this is more phony fantasy?
No, I think I like a lot of those things that Nigel Farage is talking about, not least because most of them are our policies, or have been our policies for some time, paying people to go back, deporting people who into a third country or Rwanda or otherwise, as we tried to do, as you know, Jonathan, we were blocked by the opposition 134 times. It took us to get that legislation through. And then the courts tried to stop us as well. So, taking ourselves out of the European Convention on Human Rights, I've never had a problem with that. And I think Kemi's said the same. So many of the things Nigel Farage is talking about are conservative policies that would implement in a future parliament. I think the reality is the frustration amongst the public is that we didn't do them. We can explain why. You and I can explain why, because we're opposed at every turn. So these things are more difficult than they sound. But I think Kemi is the kind of person who will in the future make these things happen and make sure we do put in place the measures we need to put in place to make sure illegal migrants don't come over the channel, and whether they're illegal migrants here or foreign nationals who committed offences here, then are deported to another country.
Well, Kevin, I moaned earlier on the show. I won't ask you to comment on it because of time, because I want to make sure I do get to the IMF story. But I will say there were Conservative MPs who voted against amendments to the Safety of Rwanda Act that people like myself put down. That's now part of the deportation bill. So you can imagine I'm pretty miffed at the best of times. I have to listen to some of the pontificating from some of your colleagues, some of my ex-colleagues, because quite frankly, they opposed it at every turn internally too, not just the opposition. But I do want to get to that point quickly that you raised rightly on the Sunday Telegraph. Reeves heading for IMF bailout. We've had the statistics, obviously, regarding unemployment up to 4.7%, inflation up to 3.8%. We've obviously got the cost of government borrowing way higher than it ever was under that disastrous mini-budget from Liz Truss. I mean, the reality is Labour is killing the economy and we're heading for disaster.
Well, I hope it's not disaster. We don't want this country to go into recession or to have to go to a bailout. So let's hope she changes course quickly. But I think the most powerful quote in that article, which is on the Twitter a few days ago from Andrew Sentence, who is a former member of the Monetary Policy Committee, which sets interest rates for the Bank of England, had said what's happening in our economy are all due to the choices of Rachel Reeves. She has fueled inflation through hitting the economy, all these massive tax rises, 40 billion a year, and these extra spending, another 30 billion a year, and all that's gone into public sector pay rises without any productivity improvements, huge tax and spend. All this is down to Rachel Reeves. She's hapless. To be honest, she's completely out of her depth. And, I think it's come to the time when Keir Starmer, to restore confidence, has to be looking at reshuffling her ministers and taking Rachel Reeves out of that post and putting somebody competent in.
Kevin Hollinrate, Conservative Party Chairman and Member of Parliament, thank you so much for joining us on Talk today. I go now to Peter Carbar, who will be taking over between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m, getting lots of amazing interviews, I'm sure, lined up. Peter, take us through it.
Hello, sir. Yes, lots to discuss, including Starmer curbing judges' power in asylum cases. Will this work? It seems to me like administrative tinkering. We'll see if that huge backlog, over 50,000 cases, actually gets sorted in some way. We'll talk about the protests as well. Yesterday, the Notting Hill Carnival, Rachel Reeves, the tax story you were talking about with Kevin there a second ago. Lord Wolney's coming on, the former government advisor on political violence and disruption. We'll talk about